Chapter 2653. Ghost Emperor's Testament. The Tomb of the Ghost Emperor. The Corpse King's expression changed completely. The horror in his expression could not be concealed. The Ghost King also thought of the same thing. His eyes trembled violently, and at the same time, there was an unconcealable passion and desire. Both the Corpse King and the Ghost King knew very well what the tomb of the Ghost Emperor meant. At this time, the others were still in great fear. They did not know why there were still people in this place. "I am very surprised that you can come here." At this time, the Ghost Emperor's voice sounded again. It was extremely cold. "But your path ends here. Your power will be absorbed by me. For you to be able to become a little stone on the road to resurrection is also a great honor. Next, enjoy the power of chaos evil energy." As the voice fell, a bloody evil energy suddenly surged out from the surrounding walls. The entire space suddenly became dark red. It was extremely strange. "What's going on?" someone shouted in shock. His face was pale and bloodless. Everything that was happening in front of them was too strange. No normal person could accept it. "I want to get out of here." The next moment, someone could not bear the pressure of the bloody evil energy. He roared and directly attacked the wall on the side. That person struck out with his palm, but only an incomparably weak palm shadow appeared. Before it could touch the wall, it had already disappeared. The surrounding walls not only released the bloody evil energy, but also released a terrifying pressure. In addition, the evil energy in the space kept weakening everyone's martial body, so everyone's power was greatly suppressed. "It's over. It's over. I'm going to die here." The person was scared out of his wits. He shouted as if he had gone mad. Seeing this, the others looked even more panicked. Some even cried on the spot. Nietion's gaze swept across everyone and could not help but frown. These people were experts close to the sage level. Their current performance was really disappointing. The current situation was indeed close to despair. But until the last moment, Nietion would never give up. "Ouching, don't worry, I will definitely take you out of here." Nietion looked at Jun Ouching, his eyes firm as he said. Jun Ouching nodded heavily and said, "I believe you." Nietion nodded, then walked to the side of the Corpse Lord and Ghost King. Just now, Nietion saw the strange expressions of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King. It was obvious that the two of them knew something. "Lord Corpse Lord, Lord Ghost King, at this moment, don't you have anything to say?" Nietion looked at the Corpse Lord and Ghost King and said without hesitation. The Corpse Lord frowned and hesitated for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Nietion, I know you have a lot of questions in your heart. If we can get out of here, I'll explain everything to you. But now, it's practically impossible for us to leave the Ghost Emperor's tomb. Lord Corpse Lord, you know that this is the Ghost Emperor's tomb." Nietion was stunned for a moment, his eyes flashing as he asked. The name of the Ghost Emperor's tomb, Nietion had heard Feng Qi mention it before. It was rumored that the Ghost Emperor's will, which recorded the secrets of the sage, was in the Ghost Emperor's tomb. At this moment, Nietion knew that they had come to the Ghost Emperor's tomb. The Corpse Lord nodded and said, "Since you already know the biggest secret of the Ghost Emperor's tomb, then I'll tell you the secret of the Ghost Emperor's tomb." Nietion's eyes flashed as he looked straight at the Corpse Lord, looking forward to the latter's next words. The Corpse Lord took a deep breath and continued, "The Ghost Emperor's soul bone is stored in the Ghost Emperor's tomb. The entire Ghost Emperor's tomb is the core of the Ghost Emperor's tomb. The power absorbed by the 9 ghost vein blood springs will eventually gather in the Ghost Emperor's tomb and be absorbed by the Ghost Emperor's soul bone. As long as the Ghost Emperor's soul bone absorbs enough power, the Ghost Emperor can be resurrected. The formation around the Ghost Emperor's tomb is the most powerful. Now that we are trapped here, the Ghost Emperor will slowly absorb and devour our power and use it to resurrect. I'm afraid we can only wait for death now." After saying the last sentence, The corpse lord's eyes were filled with deep despair. How do you know all this? Nye Tian asked after being stunned for a moment. The corpse lord was very familiar with the ghost emperor's tomb. This was very strange. I learned this information from the ghost emperor's will. The corpse lord nodded slightly and looked at Nye Tian. Ghost emperor's will? Nye Tian was stunned again. His eyes trembled as he asked, "Why do you have the ghost emperor's will?" Rumor had it that the ghost emperor's will was in the ghost emperor's tomb. Why would it be with the corpse lord? Could it be that the corpse lord had been to the ghost emperor's tomb before? The ghost king and I have entered the ghost emperor's tomb before. Although we don't remember what happened in the ghost emperor's will, we brought it out. The corpse lord said in a deep voice, but his eyes were shining with a very strange light. Lord Corpse Monarch, may I have a look at the ghost emperor's will? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he said to the corpse monarch. The ghost emperor's will is divided into the first and second volumes. The ghost king and I will keep half of it. The corpse lord took out the first volume of the ghost emperor's will and handed it to Nye Tian. Lord Ghost King. Nye Tian took the first volume of the ghost emperor's will and looked at the ghost king. The ghost king's eyes narrowed. Of course, he knew what Nye Tian meant. Without hesitation, he took out the second volume of the ghost emperor's will and handed it to Nye Tian. Nye Tian took the ghost emperor's will and quickly looked through it. He found the records about the ghost emperor's tomb. We are only a few thousand meters away from the place where the ghost emperor's soul bone is. Nye Tian and Lu Lan looked around and soon found that the ghost emperor's soul bone was at the end of the passage. They were only a few thousand meters away from the ghost emperor's soul bone. In other words, as long as they could reach the end of the passage, they would be able to see the ghost emperor's soul bone. And as long as they could see the ghost emperor's soul bone and destroy it, they would be able to kill the ghost emperor. Nye Tian suddenly raised his head and looked at the end of the passage. His eyes were filled with unconcealable passion. However, he knew that although the passage was only a few thousand meters long, it would not be easy to walk through it. The passage was filled with terrifying chaotic evil energy. The closer one got to the ghost emperor's soul bone, the stronger the chaotic evil energy and the greater the pressure. Therefore, walking through a few thousand meters was as difficult as ascending to heaven. Nye Tian, do you want to walk through it? The corpse lord and the ghost king asked in surprise when they saw Nye Tian's strange expression. Yes. Nye Tian nodded. His eyes were filled with determination. Walking to the other end of the passage and destroying the ghost emperor's soul bone was their only chance of survival. Nye Tian felt that the chaotic evil energy in the space was getting stronger. He no longer hesitated and prepared to walk to the end of the passage. Chapter 26:54. The final step. Nye Tian looked at the corpse lord and the ghost king, and could not help but be stunned. He did not expect that these two would be willing to accompany him. All right. Nye Tian nodded, and his expression became even more determined. Then, he went to Jun Aoqing's side, and told her to stay where she was. All the martial artists present were being oppressed by the evil energy of chaos, and many of them found it difficult to even stand, making it impossible for them to walk with Nye Tian. Jun Aoqing, Feng Qi, Huang Fuhong, and the others were all as pale as paper, and it was obvious that they were about to reach the limits of their martial bodies. At the moment, there were only 5 who could move. The corpse lord, the ghost king, Yan Lingtian, Qin Shouhan, and Nye Tian. It was not surprising that the first 4 could move, since their strength was there for all to see, and it was normal for them to be able to resist the oppression of the evil energy of chaos. However, Nye Tian's reaction was very strange. He was only a late-stage paramount god, and was definitely the weakest among them all. Even the demi-saint and demi-saint powerhouses could not resist the oppression of the evil energy of chaos, so how could he? The corpse lord and the ghost king looked at Nye Tian with burning eyes, not surprised, but expectant. They knew that the reason why Nye Tian could resist the evil energy of chaos was actually because of the power of the demonic gods. The evil energy of chaos in the space was evil and violent, but it was faintly oppressed by the power of the demonic gods. If not for that, the Ghost King would not have sought out Nye Tian and asked the latter to help him open the gate of the sacred realm. The Ghost Emperor's will recorded that there were several kinds of power to open the gate of the sacred realm, and one of them was the power of the demonic gods. Although the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King could also create the power of the demonic gods when they joined forces, it was after all a fusion, and not from the demonic nascent embryo, so it was not pure. To open the gate of the sacred realm, the purest power of the demonic gods was needed. Lord Corpse Lord, Lord Ghost King, let's go. Nye Tian came in front of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King, took a deep breath and said, The two of them nodded at the same time and prepared to walk towards the other end of the tunnel with Nye Tian. And at this moment, Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan also walked over. Clearly, they wanted to go together. Although they did not know what was at the other end of the tunnel, they could guess some things. Nye Tian glanced at Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan. He did not say anything and only nodded his head. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the five of them walked towards the other end of the tunnel. After taking a few steps forward, Nye Tian clearly felt that the chaotic evil energy in the air had become much denser, which made him feel even more terrifying pressure. Compared to Nye Tian, the Corpse Lord and the other three were clearly more relaxed. Following that, the five figures walked for about a kilometer before their footsteps visibly slowed down. The entire passageway was 3,000 meters long, and the remaining distance was 2,000 meters. At this moment, Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan had already begun to pant, and beads of sweat oozed from their foreheads. Every step they took was extremely difficult. However, the strange thing was that Nye Tian didn't seem to have changed much. He could sense that the chaotic evil energy in the air had grown stronger, but the pressure he felt didn't seem to have grown much stronger. The power of the God-fiend origin embryo is indeed the same as that kind of evil energy. The Corpse Lord and the Ghost King looked at Nye Tian and thought to themselves. Nye Tian and the others continued forward. After walking for another kilometer, their speed became even slower. Nye Tian felt that the blood flow in his body had increased, his meridians were trembling slightly, and his bones were also making sounds of being squeezed. But what was even more strange was that he actually felt that the God-fiend ocean in the origin embryo space had become berserk. It seemed that the chaotic evil energy that had invaded his body had a strong stimulating effect on the God-fiend ocean, causing the originally calm God-fiend ocean to become restless. This change made Nye Tian frown. He was very worried. He knew that there was a terrifying seal under the God-fiend ocean. Back then, in order to suppress this seal, Fat Cat had used the dark origin power of the dark abyss to barely calm the seal. If at this time, the seal in his body broke out again, it would be troublesome. And at this time, Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan were in a terrible situation. Both of their faces were incomparably pale, and the aura in their bodies was very unstable. They were about to reach the limits of their martial bodies. Lord Sword Sage, Lord Sword Demon, you can stop now. Nye Tian took a deep breath and said to Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan. No. But before he could finish, Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan growled. They were both peak swordsmen, so they naturally had pride in their hearts. Even Nye Tian could withstand the pressure, but they were about to stop. Naturally, they could not accept this. Nye Tian used his divine sense to sense the aura of the two. Although it was very unstable, it was not weak. They should be able to endure for a while more. At this time, they were only a kilometer away from the end of the passage. The last kilometer was the true test. The five of them continued forward. Step by step, they left footprints on the hard stone floor. After 500 meters, Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan finally could not hold on anymore. Their bodies were swaying slightly, as if they were about to collapse in the next moment. This time, before Nyetian could speak, the two of them said in unison, "I'm going to stop." Nyetian nodded, but did not say anything. At this moment, saying another word would be a huge drain on his energy. Yenlingyun and Qin Shohan sat down cross-legged. Sword aura was slowly released from their bodies, fusing together, and then wrapped around Nyetian's body. They could no longer go on. They could only do their best to help Nyetian. Nyetian used the sword aura that wrapped around his body to walk 100 meters with some ease. Then, after 400 meters, the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King stopped. They had also reached their limits, and could no longer go forward. At this time, they were only 100 meters away from the end of the passage. But the last 100 meters could only be walked by Nyetian alone. The Corpse Lord and the Ghost King sat cross-legged. Just like Yenlingyun and Qin Shohan, they released the last of their energy, fusing and creating the power of the gods and demons. They used their last effort to help Nyetian. With the help of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King, Nyetian walked the next few dozen meters with relative ease. After a moment, his figure arrived at a distance of only a few meters away from the end of the passage. In front of him was a liquid door that flickered with a dark light. As long as he could pass through this door, he would be able to see the legendary Ghost Emperor Soulbone. Every step that followed was a test of Nyetian's martial body and temperament. With every step he took, he felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. That kind of pain that penetrated into his bones was almost unbearable, and at this time, the sea of gods and demons in his body had also gone berserk to the extreme. Boom! Within the nascent embryo space, a rumbling roar sounded. It was extremely terrifying, as if it was the end of the world. Nyetian walked step by step, enduring the immense pain, and finally arrived in front of the liquid door. The last step. At this time, his body had already reached its limit. All the blood in his body flowed in reverse, his bones creaked, and his martial body seemed to be on the verge of collapse. However, he finally took the most difficult step. Half of his body entered the liquid door. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the sea of gods and demons had gone berserk to its limit. Chapter 2655. Chapter 2655. Chapter 2655. Ghost Emperor's body. Nyetian was shocked when he felt the awakening of the demon and god's powers. If the demon and god's powers broke through the barrier of the dark abyss and the power of the seal erupted, it would be terrible. Nyetian's current martial body could not withstand the power of the seal at all. Once the seal was broken, he would be reduced to ashes in an instant. He froze on the spot, tensed up, and did not dare to breathe. But after that, nothing happened. After awakening 4 demon and god's powers, the sea of gods and demons calmed down and returned to normal. That was close. Nyetian let out a deep breath, a panicked expression on his face. Then, he took a step forward and passed through the liquid door. When his next step landed, an extremely spacious hall appeared in front of him. An extremely evil aura circulated in the hall. The space was dark and gloomy, making one feel very oppressed. Nyetian became cold for a moment, then began to observe the hall. In the surrounding space, apart from the evil aura, there was nothing particularly strange. "There's no Ghost Emperor's soul bone here?" Nyetian was surprised. He had gone through so much to reach this place, but there was nothing. He could not accept it. Boom! At this moment, a sudden roar came from the sky above the hall, and a strange scene appeared. In the air, a strange black ball of light appeared. It floated in the air, constantly releasing terrifying dark energy. Chaos, evil energy. Nyetian was stunned for a moment, then exclaimed. The power that the black light ball was releasing was chaos, evil energy. Boom! In the space, chaos, evil energy was constantly released, spreading in the void. The black light ball was like a storm vortex that stored chaos, evil energy, and its aura was extremely terrifying. Nyetian stared at the black light ball, his breathing slightly quickened, and he was obviously very nervous. Boom! Following this, the black orb shuddered all of a sudden, as a tremendous pressure descended upon Nietion's figure. Nietion's body sank, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Just now, his martial body was already injured. Now that he was enduring such a huge pressure, the impact on him could be imagined. Fiend God nascent embryo, you actually came here. In the next instant, a deep voice sounded. It was the Ghost Emperor's voice from the black orb of light. Ghost Emperor! Nietion's eyes darkened as he shouted in a low voice. Kid, you've amazed me. The Ghost Monarch's voice sounded out once again. Following this, the black sphere unleashed an even more violent pressure. Puff! Nietion's body swayed and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Under such a terrifying pressure, no matter how strong his martial body was, he would not be able to withstand it. However, at this moment, he was not afraid in the slightest. He remembered what Fat Cat had said, that the Ghost Monarch was only in the form of a remnant soul, and did not have the ability to kill him. Therefore, even if the Ghost Monarch unleashed its terrifying pressure, it could only control Nietion. It was impossible for it to take Nietion's life. The Ghost Monarch definitely did not expect Nietion to be able to come here. Ghost Monarch, are you still not going to show yourself? Nietion endured the pressure and said in a deep voice. Sure. The Ghost Monarch let out a cold laugh and said, Kid, I'll let you witness my true appearance with your own eyes. Following this, a layer of black light surged from the black light ball, which gradually turned transparent. At that moment, Nietion was able to clearly see everything inside the black light ball. A white-shirt man stood inside the black light ball with a smile on his face. His body was emitting a supreme aura. The white-shirt man had a handsome face, and his eyes were filled with an indescribable evil. This is the Ghost Monarch. Nietion stared at the man inside the black light ball and exclaimed in astonishment. Are you surprised to see my true appearance? The white-shirt man let out a faint smile. It was no different from a living flesh and blood body. Nietion was stunned. His mouth was slightly open, but he could not make a sound. In his imagination, the Ghost Emperor should be a skeleton, or like those fiend corpses. It was impossible for it to be alive like this. Nietion, this is indeed his body, but he can only live inside the black light ball. Fat Cat spoke at that moment. Her eyes flickered slightly, as if she was thinking about something. The Ghost Monarch should be dead, but in his current state, he was completely relying on the black light ball. It was the chaotic, evil energy that kept his flesh from being destroyed. However, once he left the black light ball, the Ghost Monarch would instantly turn into ashes. Fat Cat could sense the invisible formation energy flowing outside the black light ball. At that moment, the formation energy was constantly absorbing the power of various bloodlines. The entire Ghost Monarch burial mound was a huge formation, and the black light ball was the heart of the formation. The energy absorbed by the entire formation and the 9 ghost vein blood springs would eventually converge into the black light ball and be absorbed by the Ghost Monarch. The Ghost Monarch was using this method to maintain his current state. It could be said that the Ghost Monarch's living state was paid for by the deaths of countless warriors. Fat Cat's eyes trembled slightly. He was very curious as to what that black light ball was. How could it control the entire formation? Kid, just watch obediently. I have absorbed enough power. You will witness my resurrection with your own eyes. At that moment, the Ghost Monarch spoke again in a cold voice. Is that so? Nietion became much colder. The corner of his mouth suddenly twitched into a strange smile. If he was controlled by the Ghost Monarch, it would be meaningless. At that moment, he had to stop the Ghost Monarch. Kid, it's true that I don't have the ability to kill you, but do you still have any chance to fight back? The Ghost Monarch let out a cold smile. Yes. Immediately afterwards, his right eye flickered, and a streak of terrifying eye power shot out, condensed into a streak of black light, and shot towards the glowing sphere. The demon eye was the only power that Nyetian could use at the moment. The ghost monarch exclaimed. It was obvious that he did not expect Nyetian to be able to attack in his current state. Nyetian had just awakened the force of the four gods and demons, thus the eye technique of the demon eye had improved significantly. Bang! In the next instant, the black ray landed on Qin Nan, but it was blocked by an invisible formation energy and shattered into pieces. Eyebrows furrowed, Nyetian growled, "Damn it!" He did not expect the ghost monarch to be able to stop the attack from the demon eye with the formation. "Kid, do you really think you can stop me with your strength?" The ghost monarch let out a hollow laugh. However, before he could finish his sentence, 4 figures appeared from the liquefied gate. Nyetian's eyes glistened in astonishment. The 4 figures that had appeared were the Corpse Lord, the Ghost Monarch, the Sword Sacred, and the Sword Demon. These 4 were supposed to be trapped in the tunnel. Why would they suddenly show up? It turned out that when Nyetian was attacking the Ghost Monarch, the latter had forcefully gathered the power of the formation, causing the pressure in the tunnel to weaken slightly. The Corpse Lord and the others took hold of the opportunity and charged out from the tunnel into the hall. Chapter 2656. The Ghost Emperor obviously did not expect the Corpse Lord and the others to barge in. If it was just Nyetian alone, he could completely suppress him, but with the arrival of the Corpse Lord and the others, the situation was instantly reversed. Even with the power of the Black Light Ball, the Ghost Emperor could not suppress the Corpse Lord and the others. Nyetian. When the Corpse Lord saw Nyetian being suppressed by a huge pressure, he directly took a step forward, and his entire body's aura exploded. Bang! In the void, there was a muffled sound, and the pressure that enveloped Nyetian directly collapsed. The black light ball above the hall suddenly shook, and the Ghost Emperor's body swayed a few times, almost falling down, and his expression became abnormally cold and ugly. He was currently only in the state of soul, and although he still maintained a complete physical body, he still had to borrow the power of the black light ball. At this time, it was completely impossible for him to fight against experts like the Corpse Lord and the others. Phew! The pressure around Nyetian disappeared, and his tense expression immediately relaxed. He let out a long breath and looked at the Ghost Emperor with a playful expression. At this moment, as long as he wanted to, he could directly kill the Ghost Emperor. The Ghost Emperor hid in the black light ball, protected by the formation. Unfortunately, the core function of the formation was not to protect him, but to help him absorb power. If the Corpse Lord and the others attacked repeatedly, they would soon be able to break the black light ball. As long as he left the black light ball, the Ghost Emperor would undoubtedly die. Ghost Emperor, do you have anything else to say now? Nyetian took a deep breath, and his expression improved a little. He smiled coldly. I can give you a chance to say your last words. Last words? The Ghost Emperor looked at Nyetian and laughed strangely. Then, his gaze swept across the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King, and he sneered. You too, it's time to return the Ghost Emperor's will to this Emperor. The Ghost Emperor's words made Nyetian frown, and his expression changed. It seemed that the Ghost Emperor knew the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King, and from his words, he took the initiative to give the Ghost Emperor's will to the latter too. Ghost Emperor, what do you mean by that? The Corpse Lord and the Ghost King were also puzzled as they looked at the Ghost Emperor suspiciously. What? Can't you two remember? Then let this Emperor help you recall. The Ghost Emperor sneered. The last time the Ghost Emperor's tomb opened, the two of you accidentally entered the Ghost Emperor's heart. However, you all simply do not know what the Ghost Emperor's heart is. But of the two of you, one has the God-restraining fetus and the other has the extreme demon fetus. This is something that I am very interested in. Therefore, this Emperor shall give the two of you a present. That is the Ghost Emperor's will. In the Ghost Emperor's will, there are 2 martial arts manuals, the Soul Forbidding Art and the Extreme Demon Art. These two martial arts manuals were left behind by the founders of the soul-forbidding and extreme demon bloodlines. If I'm not wrong, the two of you have cultivated the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon technique respectively, right? The Corpse Lord and the Ghost King were stunned, and their expressions stiffened. It was obvious that they had recalled something. Their expressions became more and more gloomy and more embarrassed. It seems that the two of you have recalled something. The Ghost Emperor smiled after seeing their reactions and said, "Think about it, if the locals didn't take the initiative to give you the Ghost Emperor's will, how could you two idiots have taken it away?" The calm voice was extremely cold, and it was filled with a chilling intent. Nye Tian looked at the Ghost Emperor and faintly sensed that something was amiss. "It's you." The Corpse Lord's eyes flickered as he reacted and said, "This was all your scheme. You purposely made us cultivate the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art." The Ghost King's eyes were trembling as he stared at the Ghost Emperor with intense resentment. "That's right." The Ghost Emperor smiled and said, "The two of you should have known that the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art are incomplete. If I'm not mistaken, the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art in your bodies are about to be suppressed, right?" Nye Tian's eyes slightly narrowed as he guessed something. The Ghost Emperor purposely gave the Ghost Emperor's will to the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King, and he even left the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art in the will. However, the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art in the will were incomplete. Therefore, the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King were in grave danger. Nye Tian finally understood why the Corpse Lord stopped him when he wanted to enter the Ghost Emperor's tomb. According to the Ghost King, Nye Tian was the only chance. The so-called only chance was that Nye Tian could lead them to the Ghost Emperor. The Corpse Lord and the Ghost King had read the Ghost Emperor's will, so they definitely knew that the passage to the Ghost Emperor's tomb could only be passed by the demon god nascent embryo. "Why are you doing this?" The Corpse Lord's expression was cold as he roared. "Why?" The Ghost Emperor smiled sinisterly and said, "When the two of you first came to the Ghost Emperor's tomb, the bloodline power in your bodies was not strong enough. At that time, even if I absorbed your bloodline power, it wouldn't be enough to revive you. So this Emperor gave you the soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art to stimulate the true power in your bloodline. But the two of you cultivated an incomplete martial art, so in order to survive, you must return to the Ghost Emperor's tomb. After 100,000 years, the power of your bloodline is strong enough. I'll be able to revive after absorbing both of your powers." QL11. But what this emperor didn't expect was that when the Ghost Emperor's tomb opened this time, a person with the demon god nascent embryo appeared. His appearance messed up this emperor's plan. Otherwise, how could the two of you come here? After saying that, the Ghost Emperor's eyes were extremely cold as he stared at Nye Tian. It was Nye Tian's appearance that completely messed up his plan. Nye Tian's eyes were calm and his face was stern. He had completely understood what was going on. So the Ghost Emperor wanted to absorb the bloodline power of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King and borrow their power to revive. It was just a pity that the two of them were too weak back then. Their bloodline power was not strong enough. Hence, the Ghost Emperor gave the two of them the Ghost Emperor's will, letting the two of them cultivate the incomplete soul confinement technique and the extreme demon art. The Ghost Emperor knew that the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King would definitely return to the Ghost Emperor's tomb again. At that time, as long as he absorbed the two people's bloodline power, he would be able to revive. But unexpectedly, Nye Tian appeared. If not for Nye Tian, most likely the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King would have already died under some grand array at this time, becoming sacrifices on the Ghost Emperor's road to revival. To the Ghost Emperor, the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King were just two little pigs, to be fattened up and then killed. But at this time, Nye Tian also knew that the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King did not absorb other people's soul confinement technique and extreme demon art. The two of them possessed the soul confinement technique and extreme demon art themselves. Could it be that the two of them are really the Nye family's ancestor and the Chi Wu family's ancestor? Nye Tian's gaze trembled slightly, sweeping across the corpse lord and the ghost king, and exclaimed in his heart. Actually, he had guessed the two's identity before, but he did not dare to be sure. Chapter 2657. Nye Tian speculated that it was precisely because the corpse lord was an ancestor of the Nye family that the latter had stopped him from entering the ghost emperor's tomb and had even helped him time and time again. Corpse lord, ghost king, you two should know very well that only I can save your lives. The ghost emperor spoke again with a cold smile. I only need to absorb the bloodline power of this fiend god nascent embryo kid to be resurrected. If you two help me get rid of the trouble in front of me, not only can I save you, but I can also bring you to a higher level world. How about it? The voice was cold, but it was extremely tempting. The corpse lord and the ghost king's eyes trembled at the same time. They were obviously tempted. QL11 The ghost emperor's words were very clear. The so-called higher-level world was undoubtedly the legendary All-Heaven Sacred Realm. To every martial artist, the All-Heaven Sacred Realm was a legendary existence. It was the place that all martial artists dreamed of. The temptation of the All-Heaven Sacred Realm was too great. Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan both instantly became nervous. Under the current situation, the Ghost Emperor clearly only needed the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King. If the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King were really willing to work for the Ghost Emperor, not only would they kill Nye Tian, but they would also be killed. Even though Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan were experts at the peak of the Sword Realm, they were still a little weak against experts with powerful bloodlines like the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King. Nye Tian's expression was even more nervous as he stared at the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King. He now understood how uncomfortable it was to have his life in someone else's hands. At this moment, the atmosphere became extremely tense. The gate of the sacred realm. After a while, the Ghost King finally spoke and said in a deep voice, I need to see the gate of the sacred realm first. Everyone was stunned and looked at the Ghost King. The Ghost King had undoubtedly expressed his attitude by stating his condition. He was willing to accept the Ghost Emperor's suggestion. Sure. The Ghost Emperor's eyes flickered. Then, he turned his palm in the air. Several invisible formation energies circulated in the air and quickly condensed into a gate of time. The space-time gate was like a whirlpool that floated in the air. It constantly released a terrifying space-time pressure. It was extremely majestic and vast. The Sacred World Gate. Everyone's eyes trembled as they cried out in unison. Without a doubt, the gate of time in the air was the gate of the sacred realm. No one had expected the Ghost Emperor to actually summon the gate of the sacred realm. However, everyone could tell that the gate of the sacred world was currently closed. The powerful pressure of spacetime outside the vortex was an invisible barrier that prevented anyone from approaching the gate of the sacred world. According to the Ghost Emperor's will, the power of gods and demons was one of the powers that could open the sacred world gate. Of course, the Emperor could also open the gate of the sacred realm. The gate of the sacred world is hidden within the Grand Formation. Other than this Emperor, no one else can make the gate of the sacred world appear. The Ghost Emperor said coldly. He looked at the Ghost King with a sunken gaze and said, Ghost King, you've already seen the gate of the saints' world. I don't need to tell you what to do next, right? I'm sorry. The Ghost Emperor's eyes darkened. Then, he turned around and stared at Nye Tian. Immediately afterwards, he turned around and fixed his cold eyes on Nye Tian. Nye Tian, I'm sorry, he said in a cold voice. Nye Tian's face stiffened. The Ghost King's compromise was within his expectations, but when it really happened, he was still a little taken aback. He was almost certain that the Ghost Emperor was Qi Wuxiong, the ancestor of the Qi Wu clan. Nye Tian, on the other hand, possessed the bloodline power of both the Nye clan and the Wu clan. This meant that the Ghost Emperor was Nie Tian's ancestor. As an ancestor, to kill his own descendant, the Ghost King was not just a normal kind of ruthlessness. Die. At this moment, the Ghost King didn't say another word. His figure flashed as he directly launched an attack. With a low roar, he thrust his palm out. The void instantly shook as a terrifying palm shadow appeared, its aura devouring the heavens and sweeping the earth as it shot towards Nie Tian. In this hall, everyone's strength was suppressed by the chaotic evil energy. Even so, the Ghost Emperor's strength was still terrifying. It was not something that Nie Tian could fight against. Boom! The palm strike pressed down with the momentum of a tsunami. There was a clanging sound in the void. If the palm strike landed, Nie Tian would be seriously injured even if he did not die. Stop! At this moment of life and death, a voice rang out, following which a powerful aura swept across the sky, engulfing everything in its path. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. The two forces collided and shattered at the same time. The Ghost Emperor and the Corpse Lord took a few steps back at the same time. What are you doing? The Ghost Emperor's eyes suddenly turned cold. He looked at the Corpse Lord coldly and roared. The person who saved Nie Tian at the critical moment was none other than the Corpse Lord. Qi Wuxiong, are you crazy? The Corpse Lord's body stopped and his aura surged violently. Don't you know who Nie Tian is? Qi Wuxiong. The Corpse Lord finally shouted the Ghost Emperor's real name. When Nie Tian heard the name, his eyes darkened and he was stunned. He had already confirmed the identity of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost Emperor. But when the name Qi Wuxiong came out of the Corpse Lord's mouth, he was still shocked. The Corpse Lord and the Ghost Emperor were really the ancestors of the Nie family and the Qi family who left the 9 regions. Nie Tian was able to see his two ancestors with his own eyes. The shock he felt at the moment was indescribable. But what surprised him even more was that the Ghost Emperor, Qi Wuxiong, actually wanted to kill him. The power of the bloodline was passed down from the same generation, but Qi Wuxiong actually wanted to kill a descendant of his bloodline. His ruthlessness was infuriating. So what if I know? Qi Wuxiong roared cold and said, since my blood flows in his body, why can't I take it back with my own hands now? You're a lunatic. The Corpse Lord roared and took a step forward. Cold and said, as long as I, Nie Dongwang, am here, don't even think about hurting a hair on Nie Tian's head. The Ghost Emperor was Qi Wuxiong, so the Corpse Lord's identity was undoubtedly Nie Dongwang. Nie Dongwang did not expect Qi Wuxiong to be so ruthless. In order to survive, in order to become stronger, he would actually kill his own bloodline. Nie Dongwang, you know that killing Nie Tian is our only chance of survival. Qi Wuxiong's eyes were as cold as ice as he said solemnly, if you can't do it, let me do it. If you stop me, I'll kill you too. Is it really that important to survive? Nie Dongwang said coldly, not giving in at all. He roared angrily, if you kill your own bloodline, then what's the difference between you and a beast? Chapter 26:58. The Battle of the Gods and the Demons, every man for himself, and every man for himself. This was the reason that the Ghost King had given him to kill Nie Tian. As long as he could survive, as long as he could obtain more power, he could kill anyone. Good! Nie Dongwang roared, his eyes filled with determination as he said solemnly, Qi Wuxiong, between you and me, victory should have been decided long ago. Both of us have come to the frozen ruins, and now that we have met again, it is destined that we cannot coexist. Today's battle will determine victory and defeat, and determine life and death. The cold roar showed Nie Dongwang's determination. He had been waiting for this battle for a long time. Nie Dongwang, the gods and the demons have always been opposing existences. Between you and me, only one will survive today. Qi Wuxiong responded coldly, his aura like the mountains and rivers, powerful and vast. The chaotic evil energy in the surrounding space was also affected, causing the entire space to shake. The extreme demon fetus was extremely in and extremely dark. Qi Wuxiong released the extreme demon power in his body, and his entire body was shrouded in darkness. He was like a murderous demon, extremely frightening. Niedong Huang's expression was cold, and his entire body surged with the spirit-restraining power. Rays of light shot into the air, extremely huge. The battle of the gods and the demons was unstoppable. Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan both felt the aura in the air, and their eyes trembled uncontrollably. Only now did they realize the gap between themselves and the corpse Lord Ghost King. Once a warrior's ability reached the same peak, the ultimate deciding factor in battle was often the power of the bloodline. Whether it was the spirit-restraining fetus or the extreme demon fetus, they were both extremely powerful bloodline powers. Even a peak swordsman would not be able to resist such powerful bloodlines. Nie Tian retreated, and could only watch Niedong Huang and Qi Wuxiong from the side. His ability was too weak, and the level of battle before him was too powerful for him. Kill! Just then, Qi Wuxiong roared angrily, and his entire body's aura rose in an instant. He struck out with his palm, and the power of his palm was as strong as a mountain, sweeping through the surrounding space as if it could destroy everything. The dark aura in the air became violent, and the space was filled with a sinister and murderous atmosphere. Niedong Huang frowned slightly, but did not speak. Instead, he struck out with his palm as well. Instantly, the sky was filled with a blinding light that shook one's soul. Nie Tian retreated slightly as he felt the pressure from the air. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on him. At this moment, he deeply felt the gap between him and these experts who were close to becoming sages. Boom! In the next instant, the two palms collided and a terrifying power exploded out. The impact in the void suddenly became stronger. Darkness and light crisscrossed, and it seemed like the entire space was about to be annihilated by light and darkness. Between Niedong Huang and Qi Wuxiong, one was the god-sealing fetus, and the other was the extreme demon fetus. The god-sealing fetus was righteous and yang, while the extreme demon fetus was evil and yin. When two extreme forces collided, one could imagine the power that would erupt. Chi chi chi. In the space, the endless wild power raged, and the space was impacted to the point where ear-piercing sounds could be heard. Pooh! Nie Tian was affected by the wild aura, and his figure retreated again and again. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and he could barely stand. Niedong Huang and Qi Wuxiong were both pseudo-sage experts. Coupled with the fact that they cultivated the god-sealing technique and the extreme demon technique, the god-sealing fetus and extreme demon fetus in their bodies could be used to their full potential. The power that they could erupt in an instant was unimaginably strong. A warrior of Nie Tian's ability could not even resist the aura of the two of them. Fortunately, the void was filled with chaotic evil energy, which greatly suppressed the power of Niedong Huang and Qi Wuxiong. Otherwise, just this aura alone would have been enough to kill Nie Tian. Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan looked at the scene in front of them with solemn eyes, their expressions full of shock and surprise. However, with their ability, it was completely no problem for them to withstand the aura in the void. Pung! At this moment, a muffled sound rang out, and the two figures both retreated before standing still at the same time. This was a battle of life and death. At this moment, Niedong Huang and Qi Wuxiong finally revealed their true faces. The mask on Qi Wuxiong's face had been shattered by the violent force, and his face was extremely frightening. This was a face riddled with holes, and the flesh on his face was so badly mangled that one could even see the white bones of his face. At the same time, an extremely dark power surged on his face. Extreme Demon Fetus. Nie Tian looked at Qi Wuxiong and could feel an extremely strong extreme demon aura on the latter's face. Because Qi Wuxiong had cultivated the incomplete extreme demon technique, the extreme demon fetus in his body had gone out of control, which was why his face had become like this. And Niedong Huang's face, although not as frightening as Qi Wuxiong's, was not much better. There was no flesh on his face, and it was actually bare white bones that emitted a white glow, as if they were burning with white flames. It was the same for him. Because he had cultivated the incomplete God-sealing technique, the God-sealing fetus in his body had gone out of control, and his face had become like this. "Niedong Wang, stop," Qi Wuxiong said coldly. "You and I have come this far, and it can still be salvaged. As long as we kill Nie Tian, not only can we restore our faces, but we can also enter the world of the saint. Isn't that good?" "Salvaged." Niedong Wang laughed coldly and said in a low voice, "It is our own fault that we have come this far. If it is our own fault, and we have to kill our own descendants to redeem it, then I would rather die. I, Niedong Wang, do not admit that I am a good person, but I am not cruel enough to kill my own descendants. You refuse to repent." Qi Wuxiong's gaze turned cold, and the aura of his entire body rose once again, and the extreme demon fetus around him became even more violent. At the same time, the blood in his body also became violent, as if it was about to go out of control. He had forcefully released the extreme demon fetus, which was a huge burden on him. His martial body was not enough to withstand such a powerful force. "The one who refuses to repent is you." Seeing this, Niedong Wang roared angrily, and similarly released the terrifying God-sealing fetus. His entire body swayed slightly in the air, and it was obvious that he was bitterly holding on. Seeing this, Nie Tian could not help but tremble. With the aura of Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong, if they continued fighting, the most likely outcome would be mutual destruction. Such a scene was not what he wanted to see. No matter what, Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong were his ancestors. And there was another important reason that Nie Tian had to consider. Before he came to the frozen relic, Qi Sha and Lian Jiufeng had found him and asked him to find Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong in exchange for information about his father. And now, Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong were right in front of him. But these two were about to fight to the death, and they were about to perish together. "No, I must stop them." Nie Tian frowned, and his eyes flashed as he roared in his heart. Chapter 26:59. A terrifying clash. Boom, boom. In the void, a terrifying power raged wildly, and a terrifying whistling sound reverberated in the air. Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong were like two demon gods, standing in mid-air, the aura of their bodies extremely wild, as if they could swallow the heavens and the earth. Boom. The two figures moved at the same time, and the void trembled. Oh no! Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw this scene. It was obviously impossible for him to stop Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong. Bang! In the next moment, the two powerful forces collided, and the void shook violently, as if it was about to collapse in an instant. Kaboom! Hiss, hiss, hiss. Following that, a terrifying power surged out and wreaked havoc in the space. It spread in all directions and turned into layers upon layers of violent waves that attacked violently. Bang! Nie Tian suddenly felt a terrifying power surge toward him, and before he could react, he was swept up by the wild power and flew backward, smashing heavily into a huge stone pillar in the main hall. The stone pillar was obviously reinforced by the power of the array, and it could withstand the impact of the wild power. The entire main hall was protected by a powerful array, or it would have long been reduced to ruins. Niedong Wang and Qi Wuxiong stood in mid-air, constantly releasing their power, and were actually fighting. This kind of clash of power was very disadvantageous to the two of them. Their martial bodies could not withstand such a powerful force at all. "No, I must stop them." Nie Tian's eyes were dark, and his gaze was extremely determined. He struggled to stabilize his body, and looked at the black ball of light above the main hall. At this moment, he wanted to enter the black ball of light and directly kill the Ghost Emperor. The black ball of light was also withstanding the impact of the wild power, but it was protected by the array, and it had avoided the direct impact, so it was fine. It was impossible for Nye Tian to rely on his own strength to enter the black ball of light. The wild power in the space was so strong that it was difficult for him to even stabilize his body. Lord Sword Saint, help me! At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly turned around, looked at Yenlingyun, and shouted loudly. Yenlingyun stared blankly for a moment, then reacted. His figure flashed, and his entire body's sword aura was released, enveloping Nye Tian. With the help of Yenlingyun's sword force, Nye Tian immediately felt much better. He suddenly raised his head and stared coldly at the black ball of light. Nye Tian, what do you want to do? Yenlingyun noticed that there was something strange in Nye Tian's eyes. She involuntarily frowned and asked in a deep voice. Lord Sword Sage, I want to enter that black ball of light. Please send me up. Nye Tian nodded heavily, his eyes filled with unquestionable determination. Yenlingyun was stunned and her expression froze. That black ball of light had an extremely strange aura. If Nye Tian entered it, would he die immediately? However, Nye Tian's eyes were filled with determination. Clearly, he wanted to give it a try. Okay. Without too much hesitation, Yenlingyun nodded heavily. Her figure flashed, and she brought Nye Tian with her, rushing into the sky. Huh! Within the black ball of light, the Ghost Emperor sensed that something was wrong. He exclaimed in surprise, then immediately shouted, Quick, stop him! Qi Wuxiong heard the Ghost Emperor's shout, and his gaze trembled slightly. However, he could not escape. At this moment, he was fighting with Nye Donghuang. Once he dispersed his strength, he would be killed in an instant. You want to kill the Ghost Emperor? Impossible. However, at this moment, Qin Shohan's voice rang out. Her figure flashed, and she directly stabbed out with her sword, blasting towards Nye Tian and Yenlingyun. Huh! Yenlingyun was surprised. He did not expect that Qin Shohan would attack at this moment. Pung! He did not hesitate, and similarly stabbed out with his sword, blocking Qin Shohan's sword. However, his figure was blocked, and he retreated a few hundred meters instead. Qin Shohan, what are you doing? Yenlingyun steadied himself, and his gaze was heavy as he looked at Qin Shohan, cold and angry. Yenlingyun, I want to ask you, what are you doing? Qin Shohan's eyes were filled with killing intent. She said coldly, Don't you know that the Ghost Emperor can open the gate of the Saint's world? Yenlingyun's eyes darkened, and only then did he understand. He sneered, Qin Shohan, so you also want to enter the Saint's world? In the Saint's world, which cultivator does not yearn for the Saint realm? Qin Shohan's lips twitched, and she said, There is a person who can open the gate of the Saint's world right before us, yet you want to kill him. Do you think I will just stand by and watch? The Saint realm was incomparably tempting to any cultivator. Qin Shohan was naturally no exception. He had just seen the gate of the Saint's world with his own eyes, and the desire in his heart was even more indescribable. He felt that as long as he saved the Ghost Emperor, it should not be too much for the Ghost Emperor to let him enter the gate of the Saint's world in return. Humph! Yenlingyun sneered and said, Qin Shohan, do you really think that this Ghost Emperor will let you enter the gate of the Saint's world? For the sake of your own survival, he has killed so many people. If it were not for Nye Tian bringing us here, you and I would probably have become sacrifices for the Ghost Emperor's path of revival already. If we want to live now, we can only kill the Ghost Emperor. Yenlingyun's words were deep and forceful, piercing Qin Shohan's heart like steel needles. Yenlingyun also wanted to enter the Saint's world, but he was calmer, so he could see the situation clearly. It was impossible for someone like the Ghost Emperor to bring them into the Saint's world. Qin Shohan, I promise you that as long as you kill Nye Tian, I will bring you into the Saint's world. At this moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice rang out, calling out to Qin Shohan. Qin Shohan's eyes narrowed slightly, and then they burned with unconcealable desire. Afterwards, he looked at Nie Tian, and undisguised killing intent surged in his eyes. He wanted to kill Nie Tian in the first place, and now that he could enter the saint's world after killing Nie Tian, why not? Qin Shohan, you idiot! Yan Lingyun looked at Qin Shohan. He knew that the temptation of the saint's world had gotten to his head, so he could not help but roar out furiously. Yan Lingyun, Nie Tian has nothing to do with you, so why are you protecting him? A gleam of light flashed through Qin Shohan's eyes. He moved slightly, and he said, "Let's kill him together and enter the saint's world together. What do you think?" "Idiot, wake up!" Yan Lingyun bellowed out and directly struck out. He slashed out wildly, and sword intent whistled out like a dragon towards Qin Shohan. Qin Shohan was suddenly stunned. Clearly, he had never thought that Yan Lingyun would directly strike out, so he could not help but be caught off guard. Bam! He hurriedly thrust his sword forward, but his momentum was much weaker. His figure was forced to retreat 1,000 meters away. However, Yan Lingyun did not stop. Instead, he struck out again and again, suppressing Qin Shohan so that he could not fight back at all. "Sir Sword Saint, thank you," Nie Tian nodded slightly. Of course, he knew that Yan Lingyun was buying time for him. Whether he could enter the ball of light and kill the Ghost Emperor would be up to Nie Tian now. Nie Tian stabilized himself and sucked in a deep breath. He directly charged towards the sky. Around his body, the wild power continued to batter. His body even split open, and bloody wounds began to appear on his body. Chapter 2660. Primordial World. Nie Tian hovered in midair above the main hall. He was less than 10 meters away from the black ball of light. At such a close distance, he could clearly feel the chaotic evil energy surging outside the black ball of light. This aura is so strange. Nie Tian could not help but frown as he sensed the aura of the black ball of light. He could sense that the chaotic evil energy released by the black ball of light was somewhat similar to the aura of the 9-level Chaos Beast and the Primordial Origin Coffin. However, the chaotic aura of the black ball of light was not as pure and powerful as that of the 9-level Chaos Beast and the Primordial Origin Coffin. It seemed that there was another kind of aura mixed in within the black ball of light. "Kid, what are you trying to do?" The Ghost Emperor looked at Nie Tian, his eyes flashing as if he was trying to hide something, but this only made him more nervous. "I want to see what's so strange about this black ball of light." Nie Tianling laughed as he took a step forward. The black ball of light was originally protected by a formation, but most of this formation was used to resist the impact of Nie Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong. Nie Tian resisted the formation and took a step forward. The God-fiend energy in his body surged out and merged with his sword will to form the God-fiend sword will. He slashed at the black ball of light. Kaboom! As the sword shadow fell, the black ball of light suddenly shook and a crack appeared on it. Boom! The next moment, within the black ball of light, violent chaos evil energy surged out, spreading in all directions in the void. "Brat, stop!" The Ghost Emperor's eyes widened as he shouted, "This is the power of the primordial world, you better stop now." Nie Tian frowned. Not only did he not stop, but he also released an even more berserk God-fiend sword will. The crack on the black ball of light immediately widened. Boom! As the crack expanded, an even more violent chaotic evil energy gushed out, like a raging tsunami, crashing against the wall. Nie Tian was surrounded by chaotic evil energy, but he did not feel the slightest pressure. Instead, he felt an extreme sense of power. And as the chaotic evil energy continued to flow out, the Ghost Emperor's body underwent a shocking change. He rapidly became thin, yellow, pale, and bloodless. It was like a green leaf that was rapidly withering at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Stinking brat, quickly stop this Emperor." The Ghost Emperor quickly withered and opened his mouth with great difficulty. However, his body was rapidly transforming into a dried corpse. Upon seeing this, Nie Tian's lips curled into a grin as the celestial demon's sword intent became even more violent. He had already awakened 8 Godfiend powers, and his Godfiend sword intent was even stronger than before. Bang! Right at this moment, the black ball of light finally could not withstand the pressure of the Fiend God's sword intent, and with a bang, it split into 2. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the chaotic evil energy was like a broken dam, surging out like a raging wave. But at this moment, the chaotic evil energy instantly condensed and tightly wrapped around Nie Tian. Nie Tian was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Nie Tian exclaimed. The next moment, he felt his divine sense being attacked by a powerful force, and he was momentarily dazed. When he woke up again, he found that he had arrived in a completely unfamiliar world. This was a strange world. The space around him was surging with chaotic energy, and in the boundless space, there was an island-like galaxy floating. It was as if this was an undeveloped world, and the power in the space was chaotic, making one feel boundless. Nie Tian's figure floated and he tried to move. But at this moment, he suddenly realized that he could not feel the existence of his own body. He was just a wisp of divine sense, floating in the space. What is this place? Nie Tian was puzzled, and then he thought of something and said in shock, could this be the primordial world that the Ghost Emperor mentioned? Just now, the Ghost Emperor shouted in panic, saying that the black ball of light was something from the primordial world. Although Nie Tian heard it, he did not pay much attention. At this moment, the strange world in front of him seemed to be the primordial world that the Ghost Emperor mentioned. Nie Tian did not know what the primordial world meant, but it seemed to be the original appearance of the world. Boom! Boom! Just as he was puzzled, the 2 galaxies in the space in the distance suddenly moved, like 2 wild beasts from ancient times, colliding with each other. Rumble! In the void there was a constant roar. The vast collision between the galaxies caused the originally chaotic energy to gradually disperse, and slowly become clear. Next, Nie Tian's divine sense became a little dizzy, and after a long time, he actually fell into a state of half-asleep. He could vaguely see the collision between the galaxies, the division and separation of the chaotic energy, and the evolution and formation of different levels of worlds. He even saw the primordial era of the giant. Wild beasts that were as large as mountains ran wildly in the wilderness, raging seas roared, volcanoes erupted, the sky collapsed, and the earth split. Endless wonders flashed past his eyes. It was as if he was a bystander, a god watching everything coldly. This half-asleep state lasted for an unknown period of time before Nie Tian finally woke up. His divine sense directly came out of the primordial world, and he was shocked to find that his body was surging with chaotic evil energy. Everything that had happened just now seemed like he had experienced countless eras, but in reality, only an instant had passed. Why doesn't this chaotic evil energy disperse? Nie Tian did not have too much time to think, and immediately growled, trying to get rid of the chaotic evil energy around him. However, his body was firmly controlled, and he was unable to move at all. Below the main hall, Nie Dongwang and the others stopped fighting and looked up at Nie Tian. Nie Tian. They did not expect that Nie Tian would actually kill the Ghost Emperor. Nie Tian was controlled by the chaotic evil energy, and his entire body was like a chaotic vortex, and his aura was extremely terrifying. The others looked at Nie Tian in shock, and they did not know why the chaotic evil energy did not disperse. At this moment, a strange scene happened. Boom! The chaotic evil energy that enveloped Nie Tian suddenly began to spin at an extremely fast speed, and there was a continuous roar in the void. Huh! Nie Tian frowned, not knowing what was happening. But in the next moment, the chaotic evil energy actually began to surge wildly into his body. Oh no! Nie Tian screamed. He did not know what kind of damage the chaotic evil energy would cause to his martial body, and immediately tried to circulate his yuan meridians to resist it. But he did not have time to circulate his yuan meridians before the chaotic evil energy directly entered the primordial origin coffin. In an instant, the chaotic evil energy around Nie Tian was completely absorbed by the primordial origin coffin. His figure froze in midair, and his expression was blank. He had no idea what was going on. It seemed like the chaotic evil energy from the primordial world had been absorbed by the primordial origin coffin. Nie Donghuang and the others below were also stunned, and they all stood rooted to the ground. After staring blankly for a long time, Nie Tian finally snapped out of his daze and muttered, "The Ghost Emperor is dead." What had happened just now was too strange. He was even more surprised that the Ghost Emperor had died just like that. The process of killing the Ghost Emperor was much easier than he had imagined. Chapter 2661. Chapter 2661. Chapter 2661 Blood Chi Seal, Ghost Emperor. Nie Tian's expression couldn't help but change when he heard the voice that resounded from within the chaotic origin coffin, and he was surprised to the point he almost cried out. The voice that suddenly rang out was very familiar to him. It was the Ghost Emperor's voice. What happened? Nie Tian frowned. He looked inside the Primal Chaos original coffin and saw a familiar figure. The Ghost Emperor. To be more precise, what he saw was only a ray of light, the divine soul of the Ghost Emperor. Originally, the Ghost Emperor's physical body relied on constantly absorbing bloodline power and the power of the primordial realm to maintain itself. Therefore, the only thing left of the Ghost Emperor was his divine soul. Just now, Nie Tian found it strange that the Ghost Emperor had died too easily. It was beyond his expectations. At that moment, he realized that the Ghost Emperor's divine soul had appeared in the chaotic original coffin. It seemed that when the Primal Chaos original coffin absorbed the chaotic evil energy, it also absorbed the Ghost Emperor's divine soul. This is the Primal Chaos original coffin. The Ghost Emperor seemed to have discovered something. He let out a cry and froze on the spot. Nie Tian was startled after hearing the Ghost Emperor's words. The Ghost Emperor actually recognized the Primal Chaos original coffin. The Primal Chaos original coffin was Nie Tian's origin spirit. How did the Ghost Emperor recognize it? The Primal Chaos original coffin should be the place where the 9th-level Chaos Beast is being nurtured. Why am I here? After a while, the Ghost Monarch calmed down and murmured to himself. Then, he suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, "The chaotic evil energy was absorbed by the chaotic original coffin, and my divine soul was also absorbed. That must be it." After the Ghost Emperor confirmed his guess, he immediately thought of something and exclaimed, "Doesn't that mean I'm currently being imprisoned in the Primal Chaos origin coffin by that brat?" Ghost Emperor, you're not too stupid. At least you can recognize the current situation. As soon as the Ghost Emperor finished speaking, Nie Tian's voice was heard. "You are indeed my prisoner in the chaotic origin coffin. Stinking brat you." The Ghost Emperor was shocked. Only now did he realize that Nie Tian could sense his every move. After letting out a strange cry, he fell silent. "My name is Nie Tian, not brat." Nie Tianling replied coldly, "You are now my prisoner. I am already being merciful by not making you call me master." "You!" The Ghost Emperor let out a strange cry and was completely speechless. "Think about it carefully. Talk to me after you understand the situation." Nie Tianling sneered and ignored the Ghost Emperor. Nie Tian had not expected the Ghost Emperor's soul to be trapped in the Primal Chaos original coffin. To him, this was not necessarily a bad thing. Even now, he still had no idea what the Ghost Emperor was, or how strong he was. However, for the Ghost Emperor to be able to create a super formation like the Ghost Emperor's tomb, he was definitely a sage-level existence. Nie Tian guessed that even among the sages, the Ghost Emperor was probably an extremely powerful existence. However, what Nye Tian still couldn't figure out was why the sages had fallen. Weren't sages supposed to be immortal beings? The Ghost Emperor was trapped in the primal chaos original coffin. Since he could not escape, Nye Tian was not in a hurry. He had plenty of time in the future. Nye Tian's figure moved and landed directly. At this time, the atmosphere in the space had already returned to normal. There was no longer the suppression of the chaotic evil energy. Yan Lingyun and Qin Shohan's expressions gradually returned to normal. However, Nye Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong's current state was that they were on the brink of death. The two of them were barely standing, but their life auras were continuously disappearing. Oh no! Nye Tian's divine sense swept over the two of them and frowned slightly. He then took a step forward and came to Nye Donghuang's side. He released the power of the Terra Source to stabilize the latter's aura. However, the strange thing was that the power of the Terra Source could not be absorbed by Nye Donghuang at all. Damn it! Nye Tian roared and immediately released even more power of the Terra Source, but it still had no effect. Nye Tian, it's no use. Don't waste your energy. Nye Donghuang laughed bitterly and said, I've used too much God-sealing power. My martial body can no longer withstand it. Nye Tian frowned, and his expression was extremely gloomy. He had just found out the true identities of Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong, but now he had to watch the two of them die. His mood was naturally very heavy. Even though Qi Wuxiong had tried to kill him earlier, he did not hold too much of a grudge against the latter. Ghost Emperor, do you have a way to save them? Nye Tian became cold as he communicated with the Ghost Emperor. No. The Ghost Emperor's reply was very direct and cold. He was not saying this out of spite, but he really had no way to save them. If he could revive, of course he could save Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong. However, he was now a spiritual soul, and he was also trapped in the primal chaos original coffin. There was nothing he could do. Nye Tian's expression was gloomy, and he did not speak for a long time. Nye Tian, I am already very content to be able to live until today, Nye Donghuang said in a low voice. At this moment, Nye Donghuang spoke in a low voice. He squeezed out a smile with difficulty and said, The happiest thing is that I can still see you before I die. Nye Tian looked at Nye Donghuang and did not speak. Since you are able to come here, it means that you already know the secret of the 9 great families. Nye Donghuang continued, Back then, the 9 of us came to the 9 regions for the 9 great origin powers. However, I now know that there is a big secret behind the 9 great origin powers. I hope that you will not continue to search for the 9 great origin powers. Nye Tian's gaze hardened slightly when he heard Nye Donghuang's words. He was very curious about the big secret that Nye Donghuang spoke of. However, Nye Donghuang's aura was becoming extremely unstable. It was obvious that he could not hold on for much longer. Lord Corpse Lord, I have something that I need your help with, Nye Tian said in a low voice after some thought. Speak. Nye Donghuang's aura was weak, and he was only holding on with one last breath. Nye Tian did not waste any time. He briefly recounted the matter of his father, Nye Fenghua, and finally said, The Nets and Nets already know about my father, but they want me to find the two of you. Nye Donghuang's gaze trembled slightly, and he turned with difficulty to look at Qi Wuxiong. Let me speak. Qi Wuxiong struggled to hold on to his last breath and began to speak. After listening to Qi Wuxiong, Nye Tian finally understood why the Nets and Nets wanted to find Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong. It turned out that after Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong had joined forces to defeat the Emperor of the Underworld, they could not completely kill him because the latter had the heavenly demon heart. Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong had no choice but to use their blood qi to form a seal and seal the Emperor of the Underworld. The blood qi seal that the two of them had left behind all those years ago could only be broken with their blood qi. If the Nets and Nets wanted to resurrect the Emperor of the Underworld, they first had to break this seal, which meant that they had to find Nye Donghuang and Qi Wuxiong. Otherwise, they would have to wait for the seal to be broken automatically, and who knew how long that would take. In that case, what the nets want is the blood chi of the two ancestors. When Nye Tian understood everything, his expression froze. Nye Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong were now on their last breath. The blood chi in their bodies was extremely weak, and it was not enough to support them to return to the 9 regions. Chapter 2662. The last choice. Nye Tian's eyes flickered, not knowing what to do. Nye Tian, don't worry. Although we are on our last breaths, we can still help you, Nye Dongwang suddenly said. At this moment, Nye Dongwang suddenly spoke. His body suddenly shook, and a ball of blood chi slowly surged out of his palm. Ancestor! Nye Tian's eyes darkened when he saw this, and he cried out in shock. He had not expected that Nye Dongwang would forcibly release the last bit of blood chi in his body. But it was too late. A blood chi pill appeared in Nye Dongwang's palm, and his body stiffened in an instant. He swayed and was about to collapse. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed, and he stepped forward to support Nye Dongwang. Nye Dongwang's body had already stiffened, and he had lost all signs of life. Nye Tian frowned and his face darkened. He did not say a word. Nye Dongwang, you and I have worked together and fought before. I never thought that we would die together in the end. Perhaps this is our destiny. Qi Wuxiong's voice sounded and his body shook. The last bit of blood chi in his body was forcibly released, and it slowly formed a blood chi pill in his palm. At the last moment, he and Nye Dongwang had made the same choice, to use the last bit of blood chi to help Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes trembled again, and his expression was extremely serious. Nye Tian, I brought this upon myself. I hope my last choice will be able to help you. Qi Wuxiong's body quickly stiffened, and he used his last breath to say, The Emperor of the Netherworld is a terrifying enemy. Whether or not to revive him is up to you to decide. The low and deep voice slowly became weaker. When he said the last word, Qi Wuxiong's body completely stiffened. Nye Tian's figure moved, and he supported Qi Wuxiong. Looking at the 2 corpses beside him, Nye Tian's expression was very gloomy, and his eyes were very complicated. He did not speak for a long time. Nye Tian, this is their choice. You don't have to be sad. After a while, the fat cat's voice sounded. Nye Tian nodded, let out a long breath and said lightly, 2 ancestors, thank you. Nye Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong used the last bit of blood chi in their bodies to condense 2 blood chi pills. As ancestors, this was the last help they could give to Nye Tian. In fact, even if the 2 of them did not condense their cores, they would still die. However, to Nye Tian, the significance of their actions was not to be underestimated. At this moment, Nye Tian acknowledged the 2 of them as his ancestors. In order to pursue greater power, Nye Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong had left the 9 regions and their own people. Now that the 2 of them had died in such a manner, it was a form of release for them. At least in the last moments of his life, he would have his bloodline descendants by his side. Phew! Nye Tian took a deep breath and felt relieved. Then, he tried to open the 9 extremities. The great array in the Ghost Emperor's tomb was gone, and the space returned to normal, so the 9 extremities could be opened. 2 ancestors, I will bring your bodies back to the 9 regions, Nye Tian murmured as he placed Nye Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong's bodies into the 9 extremities. After doing all this, he looked at Yen Lingyun and smiled lightly. Sword Sage, let's go. The Ghost Emperor's resurrection plan had been completely destroyed by Nye Tian, and he was now imprisoned in the chaotic original coffin. There was no longer any meaning in staying here. Yen Lingyun nodded and prepared to leave. Actually, he had many questions in his heart, but Nye Tian did not say them out loud, so he could not ask. The deaths of the Corpse Lord and Ghost King shocked Yen Lingyun. In the frozen relic, it was a pity that 2 top experts were gone at once. Qin Shohan looked at Nye Tian with a dark gaze, not concealing his murderous intent. He really wanted to kill Nie Tian, but Yen Lingyun was just beside him, so he did not dare to act recklessly. Nie Tian and the other two left the main hall and followed the original path to where the others were. Nie Tian. Jun Aoqing shouted in surprise when she saw Nie Tian coming out, and she walked over. I'm fine, Nie Tian smiled lightly. Seeing Jun Aoqing's figure made him feel much better. At this time, everyone stood up and was shocked to find that the pressure in the space had disappeared. What's going on? Everyone was shocked and did not understand what had happened. Nie Tian did not explain anything and prepared to leave immediately. Then, everyone left the Ghost Emperor's heart. After a while, Nie Tian and the others came out of the Ghost Emperor's heart and returned to the Hanya Valley. At this time, many people appeared in the Hanya Valley. When Nie Tian saw these people, he discovered that they were the cultivators who had entered the Ghost Emperor's remains before. Lord Nie Tian. Yu Qingqi's figure appeared at this time, and he was incomparably excited when he saw Nie Tian, and he quickly walked over. Yu Qingqi, why weren't you in the valley earlier? Nie Tian looked at Yu Qingqi, and he couldn't help but ask doubtfully. It was very strange that these cultivators were not in the Hanya Valley earlier. Lord Nie Tian, we were just sucked into a blood-colored grand spell formation by a strange force earlier. Just now, that blood-colored formation suddenly disappeared for some reason, and we returned to the valley, Yu Qingqi explained with a similarly puzzled expression. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he immediately understood. He guessed that the blood-colored formation that Yu Qingqi mentioned must be a ghost vein blood spring. These cultivators were sucked into the ghost vein blood spring, so it was no wonder they had disappeared in the valley. After Nie Tian destroyed the Ghost Emperor's formation, the ghost vein blood spring had naturally disappeared, and Yu Qingqi and the others had escaped. Lord Nie Tian, what exactly happened? Yu Qingqi's face was still filled with shock, and he asked with lingering fear. Nie Tian smiled faintly and gave a simple explanation. Yu Qingqi listened with a blank expression, and he didn't know if he really understood. After a while, Yu Qingqi finally calmed down and asked, Lord Nie Tian, where are we going now? Let's leave this place. Nie Tian nodded, and he immediately prepared to leave the Ghost Emperor's remains. However, the others present didn't have any intention of leaving. With the Ghost Emperor's great formation broken, the danger level of the Ghost Emperor's remains had greatly decreased. However, there were still many powerful inheritances in the Ghost Emperor's remains, which was a great temptation to them. Nie Tian wasn't interested in these inheritances, so he was ready to leave. Lord Nie Tian, there are many ancient inheritances here, and it is said that there are sages' inheritances here. Do we really want to leave? Yu Qingqi's eyes flickered and he smiled. Obviously, he didn't want to leave. Of course, Nie Tian understood what Yu Qingqi meant, but he really didn't want to continue staying in the Ghost Emperor's remains. Lord Nie Tian, since you don't want to stay, then let's leave. Yu Qingqi saw that Nie Tian was in a dilemma, and he tactfully said. Nie Tian frowned and suddenly asked, Yu Qingqi, are you willing to stay in the frozen ruins to cultivate? Yes. Yu Qingqi was stunned at first, and then he nodded with blazing eyes. The concentration of divine power in the frozen ruins was higher than the upper realm of the 9 regions, and it was especially suitable for cultivators to cultivate. In fact, Yu Qingqi had long wanted to stay in the frozen ruins, but he was too embarrassed to say it. Chapter 2663. Formation Structure Diagram. Teacher. Mu Shuijing greeted respectfully with a smile when he saw Nie Tian. Teacher? Yu Qingqi looked at Mu Shuijing with a stunned expression and froze. Although he did not know Mu Shuijing's identity, the latter's aura was vigorous and surging. His eyes were sharp and he had the aura of a grandmaster. One look and he could tell that he was not a simple person. How could he not be surprised that such an expert was Nie Tian's disciple? Mu Shuijing, this is my friend, Yu Qingqi. Nie Tian nodded slightly and introduced Yu Qingqi to Mu Shuijing. He will be following you for a period of time. I hope you can find a suitable inheritance for him. Yu Qingqi's eyes narrowed when he heard Nie Tian's words and froze again. He did not expect Nie Tian to raise such a condition directly. Teacher, rest assured. I will do as you say. Mu Shuijing nodded and looked at Nie Tian respectfully. After experiencing what had happened in the Ghost Emperor's heart, his respect for Nie Tian had reached its peak. He now firmly believed that becoming Nie Tian's disciple was the wisest choice he had made in his life. Nie Tian nodded. He did not show much of a reaction on his face, but he felt a little guilty in his heart. To be honest, it was a complete accident that he had accepted Mu Shuijing as his disciple. Mu Shuijing was known as the #1 spirit formation master in the Frozen Ruins. His attainments in the spirit formation Tao had already reached the level of a half-sage. A spirit formation master of this level was completely beyond Nie Tian's imagination. Without a doubt, Nie Tian did not have the ability to be Mu Shuijing's teacher. On the other hand, Fat Cat did. Nie Tian, give this spirit formation structure diagram to this old man. You did not become his teacher for nothing. At this moment, the Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. Then, a diagram of an array formation appeared in Nie Tian's consciousness. This is... Nie Tian was stunned, and said in astonishment, the formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb. Yes. The Fat Cat nodded and said, I just drew it not long ago. Since it's useless to keep it, I'll just give it to this old man. Alright. Nie Tian smiled and nodded. Then, he said to Mu Shuijing, relax your spiritual senses. Master will give you something. Mu Shuijing was stunned. He did not know what Nie Tian wanted to do, but he still relaxed his spiritual perception. With a thought, Nie Tian sent a wisp of spiritual sense directly into Mu Shuijing's spiritual sense. This is... Mu Shuijing was taken aback. Then, as though he had been petrified, he was completely stunned. Master, this is the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb. After a full 10 seconds, Mu Shuijing reacted and said with a trembling voice. He never expected that Nie Tian would give him such a precious spirit formation diagram. Previously, he had ridiculed Nie Tian for saying that the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb was nonsense. Although he believed it later, he still could not imagine how terrifying the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb was. But now Nie Tian actually gave him the spirit formation diagram. How could he not be excited? Yes. Nie Tian smiled faintly and said, the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb combines the power of heaven and earth. It contains the laws of time and space. You must study it well. I hope that one day, you can use this spirit formation diagram to become a true sacred array master. Then, my efforts will not be in vain. Yes. Mu Shuijing's eyes were blazing. His body trembled and he suddenly took a step back. Then, he knelt in front of Nie Tian and kowtowed 3 times. With a solemn expression, he said, Don't worry, Master. I will definitely study the spirit formation diagram with all my heart. I won't let Master down. Nie Tian was stunned. He did not expect Mu Shuijing to be so excited. After he came to his senses, he quickly stepped forward and helped Mu Shuijing up. At this time, the surrounding people were all stunned when they saw this scene. All of them were like pieces of wood, shocked to the extreme. Those who knew that Mu Shuijing was Nie Tian's disciple were fine, but those who did not know simply had their jaws drop to the ground. With Mu Shuijing's status, he actually bowed to Nie Tian in front of so many people. It was really incomprehensible. Everyone was puzzled. What did Nie Tian give to Mu Shuijing to make the latter so excited? Thank you, Master. Mu Shuijing trembled as he stood up and bowed deeply again to thank him. Other than Fat Cat, Mu Shuijing was probably the only one present who could understand how precious the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb was. When Mu Shuijing received the structure diagram of the spirit formation, he was completely astounded. He had never imagined that a spirit formation could be this massive. The spirit formation intent, spirit formation patterns, and spirit formation principles were things that he could only dream of. He guessed that Nie Tian must have expended an unimaginable amount of mental strength to be able to inscribe such a large formation diagram. However, what he could not understand was that Nie Tian's mental strength was not strong. How could he possibly inscribe such a large formation diagram? Little did he know that all of this was actually done by Fat Cat. If it was Nie Tian, even if he was given such a formation diagram and was asked to inscribe it again, he would probably not be able to inscribe it even after 1,000 or 10,000 years. Only a heaven-defying existence like Fat Cat could inscribe such a large and complicated formation diagram in such a short time. At this moment, Mu Shuijing felt that he was the luckiest divine array master in the world. As long as he could understand the array intent within the spirit formation diagram of the Ghost Emperor's tomb, he would really have a chance to advance to become a divine array master. It was precisely because of this that Mu Shuijing was so excited. Shuijing, I'm going to leave now. I'll leave you Qingqi in your care. Nie Tian smiled and reminded Mu Shuijing again. Don't worry, master. I'll definitely protect young master you. Mu Shuijing nodded repeatedly, his eyes filled with unconcealable excitement. Nie Tian nodded and did not say anything else. After taking care of Yu Qingqi, he began to bid farewell to Feng Qi, Huang Fuhong, and the rest. Brother Nie, you're leaving? Huang Fuhong was shocked when he heard that Nie Tian was leaving. He said, There are many inheritances in the Ghost Emperor's tomb. Do you really not want them? I'm not interested in inheritances. Moreover, I have important matters to attend to. I really can't delay any longer. Nie Tian smiled faintly and looked at Feng Qi. Feng Qi chuckled and said, Nie Tian, where do you plan to go after leaving the Ghost Emperor's tomb? Back to the 9 territories. Nie Tian smiled faintly and did not hide anything. The 9 territories are the core of the myriad territories. I'm very interested. Why don't you bring me back? Feng Qi laughed. It was unknown whether he was serious or joking. Feng Qi, don't be ridiculous. Just as he finished speaking, Yan Lingyun's face darkened and said, How can you go to the 9 territories so casually? Nie Tian could not help but frown when he saw Yan Lingyun being so nervous. He felt that it was very strange. Although the 9 territories were the core of the myriad territories, the cultivators there were very weak. Feng Qi's current combat strength was almost close to a half-sage expert. If he went to the 9 territories, wouldn't he be an undefeatable existence? However, Yan Lingyun's face was nervous as if Feng Qi was going to some dangerous place. Chapter 2664. Following along the way, Nie Tian was very curious. Why was Yan Lingyun so anxious about Feng Qi going to the 9 regions? Uncle Yan, do I look like I'm fooling around? Feng Qi looked at Yan Lingyun and asked seriously. Feng Qi, going to the 9 regions is not a joke. You know that place. Yan Lingyun frowned, his expression darkening. Uncle Yan, I understand what kind of place the 9 regions are. I will not change my decision. Before Yan Lingyun could finish, Feng Qi interrupted him with an extremely solemn expression. Yan Lingyun's expression darkened. He did not know what to say. He knew that although Feng Qi did not look very steady normally, his temperament was much more mature than his peers. Once he decided to do something, he would not change his mind. Uncle Yan, don't worry. I will be fine. Feng Qi knew that Yan Lingyun was worried about him. Feng Qi, I want to know, why do you want to go to the 9 regions? Yan Lingyun thought for a long time and finally nodded. He looked at Feng Qi and asked the question in his heart. I want to be friends with Nie Tian. Feng Qi smiled faintly, speaking in a very relaxed manner. Nie Tian was speechless. We are already friends. Our friendship is not deep enough. Feng Qi smiled again. I want to be a little deeper. Nie Tian could not help but smile, but he did not say anything. Huang Fuhong also wanted to go to the 9 regions with Nie Tian, but he was the young master of the ice tower. Huang Fu Chongqing would not let him go. Nie Tian and the others did not linger. Under the astonished and reluctant gazes of the crowd, they directly left. A few hours later, Nie Tian and the others found the exit of the Ghost Emperor burial ground. After a while, their figures appeared in the Ghost Emperor Valley. Finally out. Feng Qi walked out of the valley with a relaxed expression. This trip to the Ghost Emperor burial ground was not in vain. At least I killed that guy. Nie Tian smiled. Of course, he knew that the guy Feng Qi mentioned was the evil spear Emperor Ling Sanxin. Not only did Feng Qi kill Ling Sanxin, but he also absorbed an inheritance. On the other hand, Nie Tian did not only kill Ling Sanxin, but he also absorbed an inheritance. However, Nie Tian also had his own gains. He figured out the identity of the Corpse King and the Ghost King, and obtained their blood qi pills. With these 2 blood qi pills, he could exchange information about Nie Fenghua with the inescapable net. Feng Qi, why did Lord Sword Saint look so nervous just now? Nie Tian couldn't help but ask curiously. No big deal. I'll explain it to you when we get to the 9 regions, Feng Qi said with a faint smile. Nie Tian nodded with a smile, and did not ask any more questions. Next, Nie Tian prepared to leave the frozen relic and not return to the 10,000 Mountain sect. He was most concerned about Yu Ji Wushuang's integration with the spiritual heart of all wood and his father, Nie Fenghua. He guessed that Yu Ji Wushuang's integration with the spiritual heart of all wood would be enough when he returned to the 9 regions. Nie Tian determined the route to return to the 9 regions according to the map in the Book of 9 Primordial Elements. 3 days later, Nie Tian and the others arrived in the middle of a violent void. High up in the sky, the wind blew, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. It was a violent scene. This was the connection between the space-time of the frozen relic and the 9 regions. However, Nie Tian did not immediately use the space-time scroll to open the space. Instead, he looked at the void behind him. Thousand Cloud Sect Leader, you are really persistent. You followed me from the Ghost Emperor burial ground all the way here, Nie Tian said with a smile. You found me. A voice rang out in the void and a figure appeared. It was the sect leader of the Thousand Cloud Sect, Ji Gufeng. Feng Qi already knew that Ji Gufeng had been following them in secret. He said with a smile, "This guy is really not easy. Why did he follow us here instead of going to the Ghost Emperor burial ground?" Ji Gufeng's figure blurred into motion, and with a single step, he appeared hundreds of meters away. Staring coldly at Nie Tian and the others, he sneered and said, "Humph, you've brought about your own destruction by coming here. I followed you all the way here to find a place where there is no one and kill you all." Nie Tian smiled and did not panic at all. He said, "Thousand Cloud Sect Leader, I don't remember there being any deep hatred between us. Even when we were at the 10,000 Mountain sect, I only killed people from the 100 Rivers Divine sect. I didn't kill anyone from the 1,000 Cloud sect. You didn't go to the Ghost Emperor burial ground and followed me all the way here just to kill me?" To be honest, there wasn't much of a grudge between Nie Tian and the 1,000 Cloud sect. At least, that was what he thought. It was understandable if the people from the 100 Rivers Divine sect followed them all the way here, but Ji Gufeng followed them all the way here. That was a bit too much. Nie Tian, if it weren't for you and Mu Honglu, would my 1,000 Cloud sect have lost a third of our territory? Ji Gufeng sneered. His eyes were about to spit fire. Nie Tian was stunned and smiled speechlessly. 1,000 Cloud Sect Leader, this was done by Sect Leader Mu, right? What does it have to do with me? Back then, the 1,000 Cloud Sect had given up a third of their territory because of Mu Honglu. What did it have to do with Nie Tian? It was indeed a bit far-fetched for Ji Gufeng to blame this on Nie Tian. Nye Tian, I don't want to waste time with you. I don't need a reason to kill you. Ji Gufeng smiled cold. You have a lot of good stuff on you. I'm very interested in them. Then, Ji Gufeng's eyes flickered with greed. So you want my power? Nye Tian laughed and looked at Feng Qi, Thousand Cloud sect leader. Are you planning to kill Feng Qi as well? Of course. Ji Gufeng snickered. I've waited for so long just to find a suitable place. There's no one else here. No one will know if I kill you. Nye Tian nodded with a smile. So you've calculated it all. Humph. Ji Gufeng smiled cold. So what if that kid is from the Feng clan? As long as no one knows, who would think that I was the one who killed him? Nye Tian and Feng Qi glanced at each other. There was no sign of nervousness on their faces. Instead, they were smiling. What are you laughing at? Ji Gufeng frowned. He felt a little strange. His tone was a little nervous. Sectmaster Thousand Clouds, are you sure you can kill us? Nye Tian smiled faintly, a playful expression on his face. To me, the three of you are merely three ants. I only need one move to kill you all. Ji Gufeng smiled cold. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Right now, there was only Nye Tian, Feng Qi, and Jun Ouching in front of him. Other than them, there was no one else. In his eyes, no matter how heaven-defying Nye Tian and the others were, they couldn't fight against him. Thousand Cloud sect leader, we are indeed no match for you. With a faint smile, Nye Tian raised his eyebrows and said, But it's a pity that you're not going to fight us. HM? Ji Gufeng frowned. He didn't know what Nye Tian was talking about. Sir Swordmaster, you've rested for so long. It's time to get some exercise. Nye Tian's lips twitched. Chapter 2665. Chapter 2665 of the WAR The Price of Taking Action. We're finally out. Sword Saint Chijue's figure appeared and immediately let out a strange cry. He then looked at Nye Tian angrily and shouted, Brat, you've locked me in there for so long. Are you trying to suffocate me to death? Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, Lord Sword King, I was afraid that you haven't recovered your strength and wanted to give you more time to recover. Bullshit. I recovered 10 days ago. You clearly don't want to let me out. Sword Master Chijua shrieked. Clearly, he had been stifled by staying in the 9 Superbs for this period of time. Lord Swordlord, don't be angry. There's a guy here who wants to kill us. You should be happy to stop him. Nye Tian had a smile on his face as he looked at the stunned Ji Gufeng. Who dares to kill you? The Chijua Sword Saint let out a roar and turned around. He glared at Ji Gufeng and chuckled, so it's the patriarch of the Thousand Clouds sect. Ji Gufeng's eyes widened and his face turned as white as paper. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He had never expected that Nye Tian would have Sword Saint Chijua lurking by his side. However, he had not sensed the slightest bit of Sword Saint Chijue's aura while he had been following Nye Tian. Little did he know that Sword Monarch Chijua had always been among the 9 Superbs. Actually, Nye Tian had planned to bid farewell to Sword Sage Chijua after leaving the Ghost Emperor tomb. However, he found that Ji Gufeng was following him all the time, so he let Sword Saint Chijua stay in the 9 Extremities for a few more days. Having Swordmaster Chijua by his side was a very powerful trump card. Although Chijua Sword Saint was slightly weaker than the Corpse Lord, Ghost King, Sword Saint, and Sword Demon, he was much stronger than the sect leaders of the 7 major sections. Across the entire Frozen Ruins, Sword Sage Chijua was definitely one of the few experts. Since Ji Gufeng did not show himself, Nye Tian naturally would not let Chijua Swordmaster out. Ji Gufeng, of all people you could kill, why did you have to kill Nye Tian? Sword Saint Chijua frowned and took a step forward. His sword momentum surged like the sea and was as powerful as a mountain. Lord Sword Sovereign, this is a misunderstanding. Ji Gufeng could feel Sword Saint Chijue's aura. He was so scared that his face turned pale and his voice trembled. Misunderstanding? Sword Master Chijua smiled coldly and said, "Then I'll misunderstand you with my sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Sword Saint Chijua moved and slashed out with his sword. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, crashing out. The sword light surged for thousands of meters and bloomed in the void. Ji Gufeng's eyes narrowed as he activated his Yuan meridians. His aura exploded as he sent out a palm strike. Boom! The shadow of the palm and the shadow of the sword collided and the space suddenly sank. Immediately, a terrifying power spread out, wreaking havoc in the space. Bang! Following a muffled sound, Ji Gufeng's figure was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. Pft! Sword Saint Chijua stabilized his body and was about to speak when he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Get lost!" Sword Saint Chijua glared at Ji Gufeng and growled. Ji Gufeng's eyes widened as if he had just been granted amnesty. His face lit up with joy and he disappeared in a flash. "Lord Sword Saint, why didn't you kill him?" Nie Tian frowned as he looked in the direction where Ji Gufeng had disappeared. Sword Saint Chijua's strength far surpassed Ji Gufeng's. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he had crushed Ji Gufeng. Although Ji Gufeng had blocked Sword Saint Chijua's attack, if Sword Saint Chijua were to attack with his full strength, Ji Gufeng would not last more than 3 attacks. Sword Sovereign Seven Ju raised his eyebrows and said grumpily, "Nie Tian, don't you know where you are? You'll get into trouble if you kill him." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he immediately understood. This was the space-time connection between the frozen ruins and the 9 zones. There were many space-time vortexes floating in the air. If Ji Gufeng was desperate and directly charged into the space-time vortexes, it would be very troublesome. Even Sword Saint Chijua could only protect himself when space-time was collapsing, but he could not protect Nie Tian for 3 days at the same time. But don't worry. If this guy dares to touch the people of the Feng clan, I will definitely tell Yenlingyun about this. In the future, there will no longer be a 1,000 Cloud Divine sect in the frozen ruins. At this moment, the Sword Saint Chijua chuckled and spoke with a proud expression. Nie Tian frowned and couldn't help but take a look at Feng Qi. He had heard about the Feng clan many times. It seemed that the experts in the frozen ruins were very afraid of the Feng clan. Even Mu Shuijing had restrained himself when he saw Feng Qi. Nie Tian was curious. How powerful was the Feng clan? "Sword Saint Chijua, you're really powerful." Feng Qi seemed to deliberately change the topic and said with a faint smile, "It's all thanks to you this time." "You don't have to thank me. There's a price for my help." Sword Saint Chijua chuckled and looked at Nie Tian with evil intentions. His eyes were very greedy. "Sword Saint Chijua, didn't you follow the Ghost King's order to protect me? Do you want a reward?" Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and then said, "Wrong." Sword Saint Chijua's eyes trembled and said, "The Ghost King is now dead, so his order is invalid. And when the Ghost King gave me the order, it was limited to Fengdu Ghost City. Now that we're here, I have no obligation to protect you." Nie Tian was speechless. He was speechless. Sword Saint Chijua had already seen the corpses of the Corpse Lord and the Ghost King. Of course, he knew that they were dead. It was already very good that he didn't have any evil intentions towards Nie Tian at this time. Furthermore, he was right. Right now, he indeed had no reason to protect Nie Tian. If that's the case, then why did you help? Nie Tian frowned and asked with a gloomy face. "Didn't I just say that there's a price for my help? There's a price to pay for my actions." Sword Master Chijua chuckled as the greed in his eyes intensified. "Sword Saint Chijua, what do you want?" Nie Tian's face became even gloomier and asked in a cold voice. Sword Saint Chijua laughed and said, "I saw the mysterious ice pillar with the giant dragon sealed in it in the 9 superbs. The frost dragon pearl that you gave to Huang Fu Hong was obtained from that profound armament stone pillar, right? You want the frost dragon ball?" Nie Tian was stunned and immediately knew what Sword Saint Chijua wanted. "Yes." Sword Saint Chijua nodded heavily and said with a smile, "Anyway, there are so many stone pillars. It's not too much for you to give me a few frost dragon balls. Sword Saint Chijua, you're not an ice attribute swordsman. Why do you want the frost dragon balls? Feng Qi was stunned and asked in astonishment. Can't I give them to someone else? Sword Saint Chijua raised his eyebrows and his withered face bloomed with a peach blossom. The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he was speechless. Of course, he could guess that Sword Saint Chijua wanted the frost dragon balls because he wanted to give them to Huangfu Zhangsheng. This guy was very smart. He saw the value of the frost dragon balls and took the opportunity to make a killing off Nie Tian. Well, since Sword Saint Chijua has asked, I'll give you one frost dragon ball, Nie Tian said with a smile. One. Sword Saint Chijua let out a strange cry and said with a gloomy face, Nie Tian, you're too stingy. You're not an ice attribute swordsman. Why do you want so many frost dragon balls? Are you going to keep them for your children? Nie Tian was speechless. He didn't expect Sword Saint Chijua to be so difficult to deal with. He frowned and asked, Sword Saint Chijua, how many do you want? Sword Saint Chijua grinned and stretched out his palm. First, he raised one finger, then another, and finally another. Finally, all 5 fingers of his hand were stretched out. Chapter 2666. And Honor Nie Tian stared at Swordmaster Chijua's outstretched fingers. His eyes widened and his face turned the color of an eggplant. 5. A total of 5. Swordmaster Chijua didn't want 1, 2, or 3 frost dragon pearls, but 5. Nie Tian felt as if a boulder was pressing down on his chest, and he was about to suffocate. It's just 5. Why are you so excited? Swordmaster Chijua looked at Nie Tian's exaggerated expression and laughed. You're not an ice attribute cultivator anyway, and those pillars are following you. They'll form more frost dragon pearls in the future. Nie Tian rolled his eyes and almost jumped up to bite someone. You're not excited, you're clearly in pain. 5 frost dragon pearls doesn't sound like a lot. Feng Qi frowned and murmured. Nie Tian's eyebrows were squeezed together as he glared at Feng Qi, speechless for a long time. 5 frost dragon pearls didn't sound like a lot. However, it should be noted that Nie Tian only had 10 of them at the moment. 12 frost dragon pillars, 12 frost dragon pearls. 1 was used on Emo, 1 was used on Huangfu Hong, and there were still 10 left. Swordmaster Chijua wanted half of them. How could Nie Tian not feel the pinch? Although he wasn't an ice attribute cultivator, the value of the frost dragon pearls was immeasurable. They were left behind by an ancient frost giant. If Swordmaster Chijua was asking for an exorbitant price, then he was asking too much. All right. Seeing how reluctant you are, I'll give you a discount. How about 4? Seeing that Nie Tian's reaction was too strong, the sword sovereign waved his hand and said. Nie Tian's expression darkened. He finally calmed down and said coldly, 2. Not 1 more. Chijua swordsman had no idea how precious the frost dragon pearls were, so giving him too many would only be a waste. He only wanted the frost dragon pearls to curry favor with Huangfu Zhangsheng. 1 was enough, and 2 were already too many. 3. Not even 1 less. Sword Lord Chijua's face darkened, and he spoke in an unquestionable tone. 2. Nie Tian frowned and shouted. 3. Without waiting for him to finish, Chijua Sword Saint raised 3 fingers and said, 1 for Huangfu Changxing, 1 for Huangfu Hong, and the last one for my collection. You! Nie Tian was speechless. This guy had already arranged the 3 frost dragon balls, but he still kept 1 for himself. Nie Tian, 3 it is. It's not easy for Master Swordmaster, Feng Qi said hurriedly when he saw Nie Tian pulling a long face. Nie Tian took 3 deep breaths and finally calmed down a little. He glared at Sword Lord Chiju and said, I'll give you 3 since you've been a bachelor for hundreds of thousands of years. You? Sword Lord Chijua's eyes suddenly widened, and he was speechless for a long time. Nie Tian let out a cold harumph and directly entered the 9 superbs, where he took the 3 frost dragon pearls and Chi Xian with him. Chi Xian had been staying in 9 superbs for such a long time that Nie Tian almost forgot about her. F***ck. When Feng Qi saw Chi Xian, he suddenly slapped his head. Apparently, he had also forgotten about her. After coming out, Chi Xian stared at Feng Qi and Nie Tian with a pair of big innocent eyes and asked, "Brother Feng Qi, Brother Nie Tian, have you found my brother?" Feng Qi and Nie Tian's faces stiffened, and they did not know what to say for a long time. "Nie Tian, give me the 3 frost dragon pearls first. I'll help you deal with this little girl," Sword Lord Chijua said with a smile. "Huh!" Nie Tian was stunned and said in surprise, "Master Sword Master, do you know where Chi Xian's brother is?" "I should know." Sword Lord Chijua chuckled and took a step forward. He took the frost dragon pearls and said, "I already know about Chi Xian. Her brother must be in the hands of thousands of babies." "Master Sword Master, is my brother still alive?" Chi Xian looked at Sword Lord Chijua and asked with tears in her eyes. "He should be." Sword Lord Chijua looked at Sword Lord Chijua and his heart softened, but he did not mean what he said. In fact, he knew that the ancestral patriarch of thousands of babies had killed countless innocent babies by refining the ominous coffins of thousands of babies. Chi Xian's brother was most likely dead. "Master Sword Master, please take Chi Xian away." Nie Tian looked at Chi Xian and let out a long breath. He suddenly thought of something and said, "Tower Master Huang Fu said that she owes me a favor. Please tell her that I hope she can accept Chi Xian as her disciple." Nie Tian had saved Huang Fu Zhangxing before, and the latter also said that he owed him a favor. It would be best if Huang Fu Zhangxing could accept Chi Xian as his disciple. "Don't worry, I'll bring this kid to Huang Fu Zhangxing." Sword Lord Chijua nodded and sighed. What kind of evil technique does old monster of thousands of babies cultivate? Is there a need to kill so many people? "Master Sword Master, the Corpse King and the Ghost King are dead. You're now the strongest of the Ghoul Corp's 13 sky coffins. I hope you can lead the Ghoul Corp's 13 sky coffins to the right path." Nie Tian nodded and said in a deep voice. Although he had not spent much time with Sword Lord Chijua, he could tell that the latter was not an evil person. On the contrary, he was much stronger than the so-called people of the 7 major sects in many aspects. If Sword Lord Chijua could become the new leader of the Ghoul Corp's 13 sky coffins, perhaps the Ghoul Corp's 13 sky coffins could really go on the right path. At the very least, they would not harm others. Sword Lord Chijua curled his lips and did not comment. At this moment, Feng Qi stepped forward and said solemnly, "Master Sword Master, if Tower Master Huang Fu is unwilling to accept Chi Xian as his disciple, you can bring Chi Xian to Sword Sage Ling Yun. Just tell him that Chi Xian is my younger sister." "Got it." Sword Lord Chijua smiled bitterly and rubbed Chi Xian's head. "Little girl, you're really lucky to have met Nie Tian and Feng Qi." Chi Xian lowered her head and did not say a word. Sword Lord Chijua's expression became much more serious. He looked at Nie Tian and said, "Nie Tian, you're the most talented swordsman I've ever seen. Your future is limitless. It's an honor for me to be able to meet you." "Master Sword Master, you must be joking." Nie Tian laughed dryly. He was not used to Sword Lord Chijua's serious expression. "Nie Tian, there must be something important for you to return to the 9 regions in a hurry. I really want to go to the 9 regions with you." Sword Lord Chijua's expression changed slightly. "It's a pity that the 9 regions world is not suitable for me." Nie Tian frowned. He could see that Sword Lord Chijua was afraid of something. "All right, that's enough. I'm leaving." Sword Lord Chijua did not say anything else. He turned and left with Chi Xian. Nie Tian looked at Sword Lord Chijua's figure, and could not help but wonder what he was afraid of. "Nie Tian, let's go too," Feng Qi said. He looked at the void around him with excitement. Nie Tian nodded slightly. He took out the space-time scroll and slowly opened it. Waves of space-time power surged out and rushed into the void. A moment later, a space-time passage appeared in the space. Chapter 2667. Chapter 2667. Return to the Nine Realms, the core of the myriad realms, the God-forbidding realm, in a dark space. Terrifying space-time vortexes floated in the air, dark clouds surged and tornadoes swept past, creating a violent atmosphere. Boom! Right at this moment, the void suddenly trembled, and a passageway split open. 3 figures walked out of the passageway. They were none other than Nie Tian and the other 2. We're finally back. Taking a step forward, Nie Tian could feel the familiar aura of the God-forbidding realm. The corner of his lips twitched, revealing a gratified smile. Jun Aoqing's expression was also joyful. Although they had encountered many dangers in the frozen ruins with Nie Tian, they had returned safely in the end, giving them a feeling of having a new lease of life. These days in the frozen ruins, Jun Aoqing had been in an extremely tense state. She could finally heave a sigh of relief. However, at this time, Nie Tian suddenly noticed Feng Qi's pale face, as if he was in great pain, causing him to furrow his brows and ask, "Feng Qi, what's wrong?" Feng Qi forced a smile, but the corner of his mouth was stained with blood. "This is the reason why Lord Sword Saint didn't let me come to the Nine Realms." Seeing that Feng Qi had vomited blood, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown and ask, "Are you all right?" "I won't die, but I'm afraid I'll be a little weak in the next few days." Feng Qi took a deep breath, his pale face slightly relaxed. Nie Tian sensed Feng Qi's body. His aura was a little restless, but it was nothing serious. Nie Tian was relieved, but he was still puzzled. "Feng Qi, what's going on?" Feng Qi came to the Nine Realms and did nothing, yet he was injured. This was too strange. The 9 regions are the core of the myriad regions. Feng Qi took another deep breath and explained, "Apart from the 9 realms, the other realms are like guards surrounding the 9 realms. They're constantly revolving around the 9 realms. The 9 realms are very closely connected, so much so that they could be considered one large realm. The 9 realms are at the center of the myriad realms, and the other realms revolve around them. Precisely because of this, the 9 regions are under pressure from other realms, causing the martial practitioners of the 9 regions to generally be weaker. However, warriors from outside the 9 regions will be suppressed by the unique space-time laws of the 9 regions after entering the 9 regions. This kind of space-time suppression is extremely powerful. Ordinary martial artists would need several days to adapt, and even after adapting, their strength would be suppressed. After Feng Qi finished speaking, he took another deep breath. It seemed that speaking too much in a row was a burden to him. After listening to what Feng Qi said, Nie Tian could not help but frown as he roughly understood. The space-time laws of the 9 realms were very special, different from the other realms in the myriad regions, so Feng Qi was suppressed by the space-time laws at the moment. Just like when Nie Tian entered the Dark Sea Black Prison, his strength was also suppressed by the compressed space and spiral space. But then, Nie Tian could not help but turn to look at Jun Aoqing and said in surprise, "Aoqing is also not from the 9 realms. Why is she not suppressed after coming to the 9 realms?" As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately remembered that Jun Aoqing was a space-time attribute martial artist and said, "Is it because Aoqing is a space-time attribute martial artist? That shouldn't be the reason." Feng Qi frowned, then looked at Jun Aoqing and asked, "Miss Jun, where are you from?" "The Abandoned Land." Jun Aoqing nodded slightly, not hiding it. The Abandoned Land. When Feng Qi heard these 4 words, his eyes suddenly shrank and he exclaimed, "The realms formed after the sacred world was broken." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he looked surprised. He did not expect Feng Qi to know about the Abandoned Land. The Abandoned Land, so there really is such a place. Feng Qi was very excited and said with a shocked face, "I always thought that the Abandoned Land was just a legend. I didn't expect it to really exist. Feng Qi, how do you know about the abandoned land? Nie Tian couldn't help asking. Although I have been to very few realms in the myriad regions, I have heard of special places like the 9 realms and the abandoned land many times. Feng Qi's eyes flickered, and he was still very excited. The abandoned land is a legendary existence in the entire myriad regions. Nie Tian looked at Feng Qi with burning eyes, showing great interest. Feng Qi sucked in a deep breath and adjusted his breathing. He said, I once read an ancient book about the myriad domains. It said that the myriad domains were originally a single entity. Afterwards, a fragment of the saint's world collided with it, causing the myriad domains to explode. In the end, it became the myriad domains we know today. Nie Tian frowned and immediately understood and said, the fragment of the sacred world that hit the myriad regions is the abandoned land. Yes. Feng Qi nodded heavily and said, the abandoned land does not belong to the myriad regions. It should be a small sacred world that was separated from the sacred world after the sacred world was broken. Later on, it collided with the myriad regions, and the sacred power of the abandoned land was diluted, becoming the existence between the sacred world and the realms. Nie Tian nodded, thinking that Feng Qi's speculation was very reasonable. This is the process of the birth of the universe. I'm really King genius. At this time, Feng Qi suddenly laughed and said strangely, those cosmic scientists are simply too weak compared to me. Nie Tian looked at Feng Qi, speechless, and had no idea why the latter was so excited. However, the process described by Feng Qi was indeed very similar to the process of the birth of the universe. When Nie Tian absorbed the chaos evil energy, he had entered the primordial realm for a short time, and witnessed the entire creation process of the entire world, and even saw various mysterious scenes of the ancient era. If possible, he really wanted to enter the primordial realm again, and experience the process of the world's creation once more. However, such an opportunity was obviously hard to come by, and it would probably be very difficult to encounter it again. When I have time, I must ask the Ghost Emperor what the primordial realm and chaos evil energy are. Nie Tian thought to himself as he thought of the primordial realm, and immediately thought of the Ghost Emperor imprisoned in the primordial origin coffin. It seemed that the Ghost Emperor knew a lot of things, and even had a deep understanding of the primordial origin coffin and the 9 extreme chaos beasts. Nie Tian planned to have a heart-to-heart talk with the Ghost Emperor after returning to the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Let's go. Next, Nie Tian planned to leave this place. The 3 figures moved, and a moment later, they arrived outside a deep canyon. Wait a moment. Nie Tian did not enter the canyon directly, but waved his hand to signal, and then extended his divine sense into the canyon. This canyon was the place where he had been attacked before entering the frozen ruins. At that time, 2 powerful experts had appeared, the Holy Parliament's Vice-Chairman Nangong Duxiu, and the Lord of Reverse Scale. However, their combined attack was still blocked by Nie Tian. Chapter 2668. Chapter 2668. Chapter 2668. Sacred Martial Guard. Nie Tian and the others stood outside the canyon. At the same time, inside the canyon, more than a dozen figures were lying in ambush. They thought that they had hidden very well, but they didn't know that their whereabouts were already in Nie Tian's grasp. These people had been hiding in the canyon for more than a month, but they didn't know who they were waiting for. The order they received was to guard the canyon for a year. During this period, anyone who appeared in the canyon was to be killed without mercy. The dozen or so people were motionless, like vicious wolves lurking in the dark night, ready to tear apart any prey that appeared in their sight at any time. But what they didn't expect was that the person who appeared next wasn't prey, but a hunter who was even more ruthless than a wolf. In the canyon, 3 figures appeared. As if they did not notice anything, they walked over leisurely. A black-clothed cultivator glared at the silver-haired cultivator at the front with a venomous gaze. Killing intent surged in his eyes. It was clear that he could no longer hold back. He had waited for far too long. At this moment, he had reached the point where he wanted to kill anyone he saw. The three figures walking in the canyon were Nyetian and the others. Nyetian walked at the forefront, a faint smile hanging at the corner of his mouth, as if nothing had happened at all. There were more than 10 cultivators hiding in the canyon. He was very clear about their auras and locations. Of course, he was not nervous at all. Kill! At this moment, the black-clothed cultivator finally could not endure it any longer. With a roar, he instantly attacked. Boom! In an instant, a violent force whizzed out and headed straight for Nyetian. The void trembled slightly, and the surrounding air was pulled taut, as though it had turned into a sharp blade, sharp enough to hurt. He was a late paramount god, and was adept at assassination. His speed and power were incredible, and he could unleash the full extent of his strength. If he had attacked an ordinary late paramount god or peak paramount god, he would have been severely injured, if not killed. Unfortunately, the person he attacked was Nyetian. With Nyetian's strength, even if he did not know, the black-clothed martial artist would not be a threat to him. Moreover, he was already prepared. Courting death. The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched slightly. His body moved slightly and the sword will around him was released instantly. It was terrifying. Boom. The vast sword intent condensed into a sword image in the air. It was like a berserk dragon sweeping across the land. That black-clothed cultivator did not even have the chance to scream before he was submerged in the sword image. Not even his bones remained. Useless chickens and stray dogs. Nyetian took a step forward and sneered. His body shook and he roared, "All of you, come out!" Rumble! The roar was like thunder, and it actually contained a violent sword intent. It surged in the space like layers of air waves, violently and violently rushing forward. Bang! 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 In the surrounding space, more than a dozen figures were sent flying by the violent impact in the air. While they were still in the air, they were already vomiting blood. More than a dozen black-clothed figures fell to the ground one after another, smashing into the surrounding boulders and cliffs. All of them were covered in blood, and some of them were even killed by the impact. Who are you?" One of the surviving black-robed men asked in a trembling voice as he stared at Nyetian with a horrified look on his face, his body trembling uncontrollably. They had been hiding in the valley for more than a month, but instead of prey, they had been waiting for a god of death. The weakest of the black-clothed cultivators were late paramount gods, and the stronger ones were peak paramount gods. But in front of Nyetian, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. Although Nyetian was only a late paramount god, his true battle prowess had already surpassed the peak of the half-step paramount god realm, and he could even fight peak god realm experts. "Weren't you waiting for me?" Nyetianling said with a cold smile, his eyes flashing with a cold light that seemed capable of killing. "We—" The man's pupils constricted, and he was so frightened that he couldn't speak. "Speak. Who are you people?" Nyetian didn't want to waste time talking. The few who were still breathing exchanged glances, but didn't say anything. "You don't want to speak?" Nyetianling said with a cold smile. He took a step forward, and a sword intent pierced out like a sharp blade, directly cutting off the head of a martial artist. Blood dripped like a bloody curtain, and it was extremely terrifying. "I gave you a chance to speak, but since you didn't cherish it, don't blame me for what happens next," Nyetian said with a cold smile, and his eyes were like a god of death, releasing a bone-chilling light. I'll speak." As soon as he finished speaking, one of the martial artists couldn't help but shout, "We are the Sacred Martial Imperial Guard of the Holy Parliament." Sacred Martial Imperial Guard. Nyetian frowned and said in a cold tone, "It really is the Holy Parliament." In fact, even if these people didn't say anything, he could guess that they were either from the Holy Parliament or the Lord of Reverse Scale. Before entering the icebound ruin, Nie Tian had suffered the joint attack of Nangong Duxiu and the Lord of Reverse Scale, and had almost died. Did Nangong Duxiu ask you to wait for me here? Nie Tian asked with a dark expression. Yes. The martial artist nodded, and his eyes were filled with panic as he said, "It was the vice president who ordered us to hide here and kill everyone who entered the canyon." Nie Tian raised his eyebrows and he sneered in his heart, "This Nangong Duxiu is really sinister. I was hit by the Lord of Reverse Scale's Black Scale Curse Chi, but he still won't let me go. Let's go." Next, Nie Tian didn't say anything else, and his figure moved, leaving the canyon. "Nie Tian, aren't you going to kill those people?" As soon as they left the canyon, Feng Qi couldn't help asking with a frown. He could see that Nie Tian wasn't an indecisive person, so it was strange that he had let the sacred martial imperial guard off. "It's not too late to kill them now." The corner of Nie Tian's mouth twitched and he sneered. Starlight Heavenly Slash appeared in his hand, and he turned around and slashed downwards. Rumble! The 1,000-meter-long sword shadow descended, and the entire canyon shook and started to collapse. Feng Qi was stunned, and he couldn't say anything for a long time. Nie Tian's sword had nearly destroyed half of the canyon, and the sacred martial imperial guards, who were already heavily injured, were now dead. Nie Tian didn't look back at the canyon, and he immediately left. Next, Nie Tian prepared to go to Nine Heaven City. Half a day later, Nie Tian and the others arrived at a small city called Ling'an. After entering the city, they prepared to rest for the night. He and Jun Aoqing were fine, but Feng Qi's complexion wasn't good due to the space-time law's suppression, and he needed to rest for a while. The three entered a restaurant and casually ordered some dishes. Nie Tian sat by the window, and when he looked at the surrounding martial artists, he felt a little strange. Everyone seemed nervous, and they seemed to be in a hurry. Chapter 2669. Shocking news. Nie Tian suddenly heard that person mentioned the Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He couldn't help but frown and look over. The Holy Parliament and the Wind and Cloud Alliance had a falling out. What's going on? The man's words immediately attracted the attention of others. Everyone gathered around. "I heard it's because of the Nangong family." The man couldn't help feeling proud when he saw everyone gathering around him. The Nangong family head went to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to propose marriage, but the Wind and Cloud Alliance master hid the person who proposed. "It seems like there's an agreement between the Nangong family and the Nangong family head." After that, the Nangong family head raised a condition. He said that if the Wind and Cloud Alliance master were to receive 3 palm strikes from him, the Nangong family would drop the matter. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Did the Wind and Cloud Alliance master agree? In the eyes of the 9 regions martial artists, the Wind and Cloud Alliance master represented the pinnacle of the martial way. However, an expert like the Nangong family head was also a top-notch expert, just slightly weaker than the Wind and Cloud Alliance master. If the Wind and Cloud Alliance master were to receive 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo, even if he didn't die, he would probably be injured. Everyone was confused. What was going on with the Nangong family proposing marriage to the Nangong family? Why would the Nangong family head raise such a rude condition? Nie Tian frowned when he heard that man's words. He couldn't help but feel nervous. "Do you think the Wind and Cloud Alliance master will agree to the Nangong family's condition?" That man chuckled and kept everyone in suspense. Did the Wind and Cloud Alliance master agree? However, right when his voice had just finished resounding through the air, a low and deep voice resounded, and it was extremely gloomy and murderous. Cold. In an instant everyone felt the cold, murderous intent. They turned around and looked at a silver-haired martial artist. It was Nie Tian. Everyone saw that Nie Tian was young, but his aura and murderous intent were extremely frightening. It enveloped the entire restaurant and made everyone feel a bone-chilling coldness. The martial artist who spoke was so shocked that he forgot to speak for a moment. "Speak." Nie Tian suddenly turned to look at him and growled cold. Only then did the man react. He gulped and said with a trembling voice, "The Wind and Cloud Alliance Master has agreed to Master Nangong's request." He really agreed. Everyone was stunned. Their eyes trembled violently and their faces were filled with disbelief. Who would have thought that the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master would actually agree to take 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo? The Wind and Cloud Alliance leader's prestige in the 9 regions was definitely in the top 3. What method did Nangong Duo use to make the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master willingly take 3 palm strikes from him? Impossible! At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly stood up like a mad lion and roared, "You're lying!" As soon as he roared, he moved and appeared in front of that person. That person was so scared that his face turned pale. His body trembled and he almost couldn't stand anymore. Nie Tian knew very well how powerful Nie Dao was. Moreover, Nie Dao wasn't an inflexible person. How could he agree to Nangong Duo's condition of 3 palm strikes? Even if there was an agreement between the ancestors, Nie Dao could ignore Nangong Duo's marriage proposal. There was no need for him to take 3 palm strikes. Therefore, Nie Tian felt that this person was Ting. The man's eyes spun madly as he stared at Nie Tian, his teeth clattering as he said, "Titi this lord, I'm telling the truth. How did you learn all of this?" Nie Tian asked coldly, his face as grim as still water. I. That person trembled as if he wasn't willing to speak. Speak. Nie Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent. His gaze was like a sharp blade that could pierce through the person's soul. I saw it with my own eyes. That person was embarrassed. His expression changed slightly and he said, "Actually, I'm from the Wind and Cloud Alliance. I'm from the Wind and Cloud Imperial Guard." Nie Tian's gaze darkened. His expression became even darker as he said cold, "What happened? Speak clearly." That person's gaze turned and looked at the people around him. It was obvious that he was avoiding the topic. Nie Tian's gaze turned serious. He took a step forward and grabbed that person. His figure flashed and he charged out of the restaurant, leaping into the sky. Everyone was stunned. Their expressions were filled with shock. Who was Nie Tian? How could he be so powerful at such a young age? In the sky, Nie Tianling looked at that person coldly and said, "You can speak now, right?" "Yes." That person nodded and began to speak. Half a month ago, Nangong Duo suddenly brought Nangong Ling to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to propose marriage. Moreover, he brought along a mysterious old man. Then, Nangong Duo raised the condition of 3 palm strike. For some reason, Nie Dao actually agreed. In the end, under the witness of countless people, Nangong Duo heavily injured Nie Dao with 3 palm strike. Then, Nangong Duo and the others left in satisfaction. After that, Nie Dao disbanded the Wind and Cloud Imperial Guard and ordered the various branches of the Wind and Cloud Alliance to leave the alliance. Therefore, this Wind and Cloud Imperial Guard appeared here. "Is everything you said true?" Nie Tian asked cold after listening to that person. "I dare not lie in front of you, Lord." That person's eyes trembled. He was still doubting Nie Tian's identity. "Where is the Wind and Cloud Alliance Master now?" Nie Tian asked with a gloomy expression. "The Alliance Master is at the Wind and Cloud Alliance headquarters. Only the direct descendants of the Nie clan are guarding him." That person quickly answered. There was finally some sorrow on his face. Nie Tian stood on the spot. His aura was like boiling water. He was like a wild beast that could go berserk at any time. "My lord, are you all right?" That person felt the berserk aura around Nie Tian. He was so scared that his face turned pale and his tongue went numb. He gathered his courage and asked, "Leave?" Nie Tianling looked at that person coldly and said, "Remember, don't talk about this anymore." Yes. That person nodded as if he was pardoned. He moved and left. After that person left, Nye Tian suddenly roared as if he had gone mad. His entire body released a berserk sword aura that soared into the sky. It was as if it could tear the world apart. Anger. His heart was filled with uncontrollable anger. To him, this matter was simply an earth-shattering nightmare. How could he have imagined that such a huge thing would happen in just a month after he left the 9 regions? Why did Nye Dao take 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo for no reason? There must be a special reason behind it. If it was just the Nangong clan or the Holy Assembly, Nye Dao would not be afraid. He must be afraid of someone since he was willing to take 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo. Mysterious Elder. In the next moment, Nye Tian's face darkened and he exclaimed in his heart. Just now, that person mentioned that Nangong Duo had brought along a mysterious old man when he proposed marriage. It must be this mysterious elder that Nye Dao was afraid of. Just who was this mysterious elder? Nye Dao was a peak godly state expert. Why would he be afraid of a mysterious elder? Chapter 2670. Frenzied high up in the sky, Nye Tian's expression gradually calmed down, but the doubts and worries in his heart grew heavier. Just who was that mysterious old man that even Nye Dao was afraid of? What was Nye Dao's current situation? Was the Wind and Cloud Alliance really going to disband? The series of doubts and worries in his heart made him extremely uneasy. Nye Tian, what exactly happened? At this moment, Jun Aoqing's figure appeared. Seeing that Nye Tian hadn't returned for so long, she was somewhat worried and came over. Nye Tian, are you all right? Feng Qi's figure also appeared, frowning as he asked Nye Tian. There's no time, let's depart immediately to 9 Heavens City. Nye Tian did not say much, only nodding heavily. Seeing that Nye Tian's expression was extremely ugly, Jun Aoqing and Feng Qi did not ask any further. The 3 figures immediately left, like 3 rays of light, quickly disappearing. 2 days later, Nye Tian and the other 2 figures appeared in the sky above Benevolent Light City. Nye Tian let Feng Qi enter 9 superbs, then flew day and night with Jun Aoqing, finally arriving at Benevolent Light City. Benevolent Light City was one of the 9 adjacent cities of 9 Heavens City. As long as they passed through Benevolent Light City, they would reach 9 Heavens City. However, at this moment, Nye Tian and Jun Aoqing's figures stopped. They looked down at Benevolent Light City, the fury in their eyes rapidly turning berserk. As one of the 9 adjacent cities of 9 Heavens City, Benevolent Light City was once an extremely prosperous city. However, at this moment, the entire city had been reduced to ruins. On the damaged ground, countless corpses littered the ground. Let's go see what's going on. Nye Tian reacted, his figure directly descending on a collapsed city wall. Save me. At this moment, a weak voice came from below. Nye Tian turned around and discovered that it was a boy about 10 years old, who was pinned under a huge rock. His eyes trembled and he immediately walked over. Zhang Xian used his divine sense to sense the surrounding boulders. Next, he released streams of sword intent from his body, slowly lifting up the boulder. Then, he reached out to pull the little boy out. Ouch! Both of the little boy's legs were crushed by the boulder. He couldn't bear the pain and screamed, but then he covered his mouth, afraid that he would alert someone. Nye Tian frowned as he sensed the little boy's injuries. He then released the power of the Terra Source to heal the little boy. A moment later, the boy's legs recovered. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Nye Tian in disbelief. What's your name? Nye Tian's face darkened as he asked the boy. My name is Nye Kong. Nye Kong looked at Nye Tian, seemingly a little afraid. It really is someone from the Nye clan. Nye Tian frowned and thought to himself. He had sensed a familiar bloodline aura in Nye Kang's body. Nye Kong should be from a branch of the Nye clan. That was why the bloodline aura that Nye Tian sensed was not obvious. Nye Kong. I'm Nye Tian. I'm also a member of the Nye clan. Nye Tian tried his best to remain calm. He said in a deep voice, Tell me, what happened here? You're from the Nye clan? Nye Kong was stunned. Then, his eyes reddened and he started crying. At this moment, Nye Tion's expression suddenly changed. He turned around and looked behind him. There were 4 black-clothed cultivators. The 4 of them were not very strong. They were only over-gods. However, the 4 of them looked at Nye Tion with extremely unfriendly eyes. They were filled with killing intent. Looks like we didn't kill them all. There are still dogs of the Nye clan alive. One of the cultivators stepped forward and sneered at Nye Tion. This kid is very lucky. He's actually still alive. Unfortunately, he's too stupid. He came back. Another cultivator had a cold look in his eyes and an evil smile hung on his lips. Brother Nye Tion, leave quickly. They'll kill you. Nye Kong was so scared that his face turned pale. He immediately reacted and shouted, "Leave? You think you can leave?" One of the black-clothed cultivators smiled sinisterly. He took a step forward and punched at Nye Tion. Nye Tion stood where he was. He did not move at all. He was like a mountain. Bang! The terrifying fist shadow bombarded his body and directly collapsed. The fist force could not even reach within 10 meters of him. The cultivator who attacked was knocked back several steps by a huge force. He did not manage to stand firm and his body smashed into a huge rock. This strange scene caused the other 3 to be stunned, and their expressions couldn't help but change. How could they have imagined that the ordinary-looking Nye Tion was actually so powerful? "You're courting death." The corner of Nye Tion's lips curled up. His eyes turned cold and his murderous intent was released instantly. It was as if it was a solid substance that enveloped the 3 cultivators. At this moment, with a single thought, the 3 of them would be crushed into meat powder by his aura. We are from the Nangong clan. What are you doing?" One of the cultivators was so scared that his face turned pale. He immediately shouted, "Nangong clan." Nye Tion's eyes turned cold and he roared, "I'm going to kill you all." Bang! 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 3 muffled sounds came from the sky. The 3 cultivators were turned into meat paste. The last cultivator could not believe what he had seen. His eyes were wide open and almost popped out of their socket. June Ouching watched from the side. From the beginning to the end, she did not say a word. Then, Nye Tion turned around and stared at the fallen martial artist with a murderous look in his eyes as he walked towards him step by step. What are you trying to do?" That person was so scared that his back was cold. His forehead was covered in sweat. "I want to know what happened in Benevolent Light City." Nye Tion spoke. His eyes were like a vicious wolf that wanted to devour someone. I'll speak. I'll tell you everything." That person quickly spoke and told him what happened in Benevolent Light City. It turned out that Benevolent Light City was originally ruled by the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Most of the people living in the city were from the Nangong clan. 3 days ago, Nangong Duo actually gave the order to destroy Benevolent Light City and kill everyone in the city. That was how the current scene came to be. Nangong Duo. After hearing what that person said, Nye Tion's eyes instantly turned red. His body slightly trembled, and he felt like his energy was about to explode. Nangong Duo was so vicious. He actually destroyed Benevolent Light City and killed almost everyone in the city. It was obvious that he did it for the Nangong clan. Nangong Duo first injured Nye Dao and then did the current scene. What happened to the Nangong clan to make Nangong Duo so deranged? Nangong Duo dared to be so unscrupulous. It was obvious that he had something to rely on. Just who was behind him? Nye Tion. Just as Nye Tion was about to explode in anger, a voice was heard. It was a little surprised and a little fearful. Nangong Lin. When Nye Tion heard this voice, his expression suddenly changed. Then, he turned around and looked at the sky. His red eyes were filled with killing intent. More than 10 figures appeared in the sky. One of them was the son of the Nangong clan's leader, Nangong Duo, Nangong Lin. Of course, Nye Tian was familiar with Nangong Lin. The latter even entered the Dark Sea prison with him. Moreover, the marriage proposal from the Nangong clan was from Nangong Lin to Nye Qingwan. Chapter 26:71. In midair, Nangong Ling was stared at by Nye Tian. He suddenly felt a bone-chilling, killing intent. His entire body trembled and his eyes revealed an unconcealable look of horror. Nye Tian's killing intent was too strong. Nangong Ling was shrouded by this killing intent and felt as if he was in an ice cellar. Nangong Ling! Nye Tian roared. Then, his figure moved and he took a step forward. The aura around him surged and suppressed heaven and earth. It was as if he was the master of heaven and earth. Stop him. Nangong Ling was so scared that his face turned pale. He screamed and immediately retreated. The dozens of martial artists in black behind him immediately reacted. One of them roared, "Where did this madman come from? How dare he?" Obviously, these people did not know who Nye Tian was and how terrifying Nye Tian was. In the next moment, 3 martial artists in black attacked at the same time. Their aura surged and they released their most powerful attack towards Nye Tian. Boom! Boom! 3 terrifying attacks, like 3 giant snakes, whizzed towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian did not care. The sword aura around him was like a gale of sharp blades, and the air whistled. Boom! 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 Before the 3 attacks could touch him, they were directly shattered by the sword aura around him. The 3 people who attacked felt the terrible pressure of the sword aura in an instant. Their figures were like kites with broken strings, and they were directly sent flying. "Murderers, all of you shall die!" Nye Tian roared. His body shook and the sword aura around him exploded. More than a dozen sword shadows shot out. The sharpness seemed to be able to tear everything apart. Boom! 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 In the next moment, there was a muffled sound in the void. Under the impact of the sword aura, the bodies of more than a dozen martial artists directly exploded and turned into a bloody light. The bloody curtain fell, representing the tragic death of one strong cultivator after another. The surrounding space was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Nangong Ling retreated 1,000 meters away. He was completely stunned by the scene before him. His eyes glazed over and he could not believe what he was seeing. He was flanked by a dozen or so guards from the Holy Assembly, all of whom were peak paramount gods. However, in front of Nye Tian, these peak paramount gods were like little lambs. They couldn't fight back at all, and could only wait to be slaughtered. Just how powerful was Nye Tian? Just a few months ago, Nangong Ling and Nye Tian had entered the Dark Sea Black Prison together. At that time, he still remembered that Nye Tian's strength was far from this powerful. Back then, although Nye Tian was stronger than him, he was definitely not as heaven-defying as he was now. The combat strength that Nye Tian displayed now was even stronger than that of a half-step peak martial artist, and even close to that of a God-state peak martial artist. But it had only been a few months. To a deity realm martial artist, it was simply a blink of an eye. How could Nye Tian's strength possibly improve so quickly? These people are the sacred martial imperial guards, right? Nye Tian walked over and stared at Nangong Ling coldly. He said in a deep voice, "It seems that the Nangong family is really in cahoots with the Holy Assembly. Nye Tian, listen to me. Things are more complicated than you think. I really have nothing to do with this." Nangong Ling felt the sharp killing intent and panic. He quickly waved his hands and said, "Nothing to do with it?" Nye Tianling laughed and said coldly, "If you had nothing to do with it, would you come here? If you had nothing to do with it, would you be with the sacred martial imperial guards?" Nangong Ling's eyes trembled and he was speechless. In the next moment, he moved and tried to escape. However, he was shocked to find that the space around him seemed to have been locked, and he couldn't move at all. Not far away, Jun Ouching stood cold. She was the one who froze time and controlled Nangong Ling. "Nangong Ling, tell me, Who is the old man who went to the Nye family with Nangong Do to propose marriage? Nye Tian took a step forward and came to Nangong Ling's side. The aura around him surged violently, suppressing the latter to the point that he couldn't breathe. I can't say. Nangong Ling's eyes trembled. He didn't expect Nye Tian to know so many things. However, he couldn't say anything about the mysterious old man. To be more precise, he didn't dare to say anything. You chose your own path. Since you don't want to say it, then die. Nye Tianling laughed, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his eyes. Then, the aura around him suddenly surged and turned into a violent pressure that directly pressed down on Nangong Ling's body. Nangong Ling died on the spot before he could even let out a final scream. Then, Nye Tian raised his palm and placed Nangong Ling's corpse on the highest broken wall, which was very conspicuous. He wanted the Nangong family to find Nangong Ling's corpse and use it to provoke the Nangong family. After the Nangong family was enraged, they would definitely visit the Wind and Cloud Alliance again. Nye Tian wanted to see who that mysterious old man was. Let's go. After doing all this, Nye Tian didn't linger. He immediately left with Jun Aoqing and Nye Kong. Half an hour later, Nye Tian and the other two arrived outside the Wind and Cloud Great Hall of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. At this moment, the Wind and Cloud Great Hall was dead silent, with a sense of desolation. In just over 10 days, the Wind and Cloud Alliance had fallen from the number 1 alliance in the 9 territories. At this moment, the Wind and Cloud Great Hall seemed to have been abandoned for thousands of years. Nye Tian's expression was solemn as he prepared to enter the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. Who's there? However, at this moment, a low roar was heard, and 2 figures appeared. Sixth uncle. Hearing this voice, Nye Tian's expression changed slightly. He immediately turned around and saw a familiar face, Nye Feiyu. Nye Feiyu was the 6th son of Nye Tian's father, and had met Nye Tian a few times in the past. At that time, Nye Tian was still a rookie who had just stepped into the God realm, while Nye Feiyu was known as the strongest over-god. Later, Nye Dao said that Nye Feiyu had gone into seclusion to break through to the paramount god realm. After a few years, Nye Tian had already reached the late paramount god realm, while Nye Feiyu had just stepped into the early paramount god realm. This wasn't because Nye Feiyu's talent was too poor, but because Nye Tian was too monstrous. In just a few years, Nye Tian had almost surpassed the entire god realm. This kind of increase in strength could be said to be unprecedented. In fact, Nye Feiyu was currently under 10,000 years old, and was considered a very young god realm martial artist. It was already very good for him to have the strength of an early paramount god. Nye Tian, it really is you. Nye Feiyu looked at Nye Tian as if he couldn't believe it. It took him a long time to react, and he quickly walked over, extremely excited. At this time, besides excitement, he was also very curious. He couldn't sense Nye Tian's true strength, which undoubtedly meant that the latter's cultivation base was already above his. But a few years ago, Nye Tian was still a little rookie. This kind of increase in strength was simply a monstrous monster. QL 11-inch 6th uncle, this is. Nye Tian nodded, and then looked at a martial artist beside Nye Feiyu. This person looked somewhat similar to Nye Feiyu. He was a little older, but still very young. What was even stranger was that Nye Tian felt that there was a very strange power in this person's body, very strange. This is your 5th uncle, Nye Feiyu. Nye Feiyu laughed and quickly introduced. 5th uncle. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he bowed slightly and called out respectfully. Nye Feiyu nodded with a smile and said, Nye Tian, you really are my big brother's son. At such a young age, you've already reached the late paramount god realm. Chapter 26-72. Nye Tian's expression froze as he looked at Nye Feiyu. He suddenly realized that he couldn't sense Nye Feiyu's strength at all. Nye Tian was a late-stage paramount god, and his perception was far superior to that of cultivators in the same realm. Therefore, he could clearly sense the strength of any cultivator below the peak of the god realm. But when it came to Nephiliu, he was surprised to find that although the latter's aura wasn't as vigorous as a vast ocean, it was very mysterious and elusive. Seeing Nietion's reaction, Nephiu couldn't help but frown and say with a faint smile, "Nietion, fifth brother rarely shows himself. This is your first time seeing him. Are you happy?" "I'm very happy to see fifth uncle." Nietion nodded, his expression returning to normal. Nephilius seemed a bit embarrassed. He coughed dryly and said, "Nietion, Qingwan has been with you all this time, right?" "Oh yeah." Nietion's eyes flickered as he recalled that Nie Qingwan was Nephilius' daughter. He quickly opened the 9 ultimates and let her out. "Dad." Nie Qingwan walked out of Juji and saw Nephiliu. She called out in pleasant surprise and walked to the latter's side in 2 or 3 steps. She hugged the latter's arm and said coquettishly, "How could you bear to leave that big courtyard? Is mother well?" "Your mom is fine. Come with me to see her later. She misses you." Nephilia's voice was low and cold, but the way he looked at Nie Qingwan was very doting. Nietion frowned as he looked at Nephiliu and Nie Qingwan. He had a feeling that this fifth uncle of his wasn't simple at all. "Nietion, this fifth uncle of yours isn't simple at all." Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang out, a strange smile on her face. Almost at the same time, the Ghost Emperor, who hadn't said a word the entire time, suddenly spoke up. However, he hesitated to say anything. Nietion's eyes narrowed, and his suspicions deepened. It was one thing for Fat Cat to speak up, but even Ghost Emperor was surprised. One had to know that the Ghost Emperor was a true Sage Realm expert. He must have discovered something astonishing for him to be so surprised by Nephiliu. Nietion couldn't understand what Nephiliu had on him that could cause the Ghost Emperor to be so shocked. However, the Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor had no intention of continuing. It seemed like they were not too sure about what they had discovered, so they did not say it directly. "Nietion, have you heard about the Wind and Cloud Alliance?" Nephiliu sighed and said with a solemn expression, "Perhaps all of this is the fate of the Nie family." "Sixth uncle, what's going on?" Nietion frowned with a puzzled expression. He only knew that the Wind and Cloud Alliance had undergone a tremendous change within half a month, but he did not know the reason behind it. The Wind and Cloud Alliance was such a powerful force, yet it had fallen apart in just half a month. It was truly shocking and infuriating. All of this must be because of that mysterious old man. "I'll bring you to see your grandfather." Nephiliu let out a long sigh, then turned and walked towards the Wind and Cloud Great Hall. A moment later, Nietion and the others arrived outside the Great Hall. "Nietion, your grandfather is in the Great Hall. Go see him." Nephiliu nodded and signaled for the others to stop. It was obvious that Nie Dao only wanted to see Nietion. Nietion nodded and stepped into the Great Hall. The entire hall was empty and lonely, and it seemed desolate and bleak. Nietion quickly entered and saw an old man standing in the middle of the hall. It was none other than Nie Dao. "Grandfather!" Nietion took a step forward and came to Nie Dao's side. When he saw the latter's appearance, he could not control the grief and indignation in his heart. A few months ago, Nie Dao was still in existence at the peak of the 9 regions. Although he was old, he was still full of vigor like a lion, emitting the aura of a ruler. However, the current Nie Dao had a hunched back and looked old. His face was covered with wrinkles, and his body emitted the aura of a dying tree. It was as if a gust of wind could blow him over. How could Nietion not be angry when he saw Nie Dao's state? "Nietion, calm down first." Nie Dao looked at Nietion and signaled for him to calm down. "Grandfather, what happened?" Nietion suppressed the anger in his heart and asked in a deep voice. "Someone from the Nangong clan has returned." Nie Dao sighed and said, "That person has returned to unify the 9 regions." "As I thought." Nietion's heart sank and his expression changed slightly. He had guessed that the appearance of that mysterious old man must have changed everything. What Nye Dao had just said was exactly the same as his speculation. "Grandfather, who is that person?" Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly as he asked. "That person is the one who made the agreement with our ancestor." Nye Dao let out a long breath as if to hide the despair in his heart. He closed his eyes and said, Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as his expression changed. He said in a deep voice, "The ancestor of the Nangong clan." The person who made the agreement with the ancestor of the Nangong clan was obviously the ancestor of the Nangong clan. Nye Tian never expected that the mysterious old man was the ancestor of the Nangong clan. "That's right." Nye Dao nodded. His slightly opened eyes were filled with despair. "It's the ancestor of the Nangong clan." Nye Tian frowned as his expression darkened. At this moment, he finally understood everything. No wonder Nye Dao was willing to take 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo. No wonder the Wind and Cloud Alliance was disbanded within 10 days. No wonder the Nangong clan and the Sacred Parliament dared to massacre benevolent Light City. All of this was because of a supreme expert, the ancestor of the Nangong clan. The ancestor of the Nangong clan was one of the 9 people that the Juying Temple had sent to the 9 regions. His strength was at least at the half-saint level. Now that hundreds of thousands of years had passed, this old monster was still alive. His strength must have increased to allow him to have a lifespan that exceeded that of an ordinary person. An expert like Nye Dao could not possibly go against the ancestor of the Nangong clan. Facing the strong coercion of the ancestor of the Nangong clan, he could only choose to compromise. "Nye Tian, I have decided to move all the direct descendants of the Nangong clan into the ancestral ground. You should also enter the ancestral ground." At this moment, Nye Dao was a little excited as he said, "As long as you are alive, with your strength and talent, you will definitely break through the peak of the God realm one day and reach a higher realm of martial arts." As he spoke, Nye Dao pulled Nye Tian away, wishing that he could immediately send the latter to the ancestral ground. Nye Tian was the Nangong clan's greatest hope. As long as he was alive, the Nangong clan would not perish. However, Nye Tian stood in place without moving. "Nye Tian, what are you waiting for? Rushi is also in the ancestral ground. You can reunite with her," Nye Dao said anxiously when he saw that Nye Tian was not moving. "Grandfather, there are some things that cannot be avoided. We can hide in the ancestral ground, but what about the others?" Nye Tian's face was as dark as still water. "The others of the Wind and Cloud Alliance and the many branches of the Nangong clan, what about them?" "Nye Tian, we can't hold on to that many shares now. As long as you are alive, you are the Nangong clan's greatest hope." Nye Dao's forehead was beaded with sweat as he urged. However, Nye Tian still stood in place and said, "Grandfather, you still don't know. Something has happened to benevolent Light City. The entire city has been destroyed, and all the Nangong clan members have been slaughtered." "What?" Nye Dao's pupils shrank when he heard Nye Tian's words. He let out a cry of horror, and his body suddenly swayed, almost falling to the ground. Nye Tian took a step forward and supported Nye Dao. He could feel every inch of the latter's flesh and every bone trembling. Most of the people in benevolent Light City were members of the Nangong clan, yet they were slaughtered. Chapter 26:73. Thunderous strikes, Nangong Jueming, you've gone back on your word. A furious roar echoed throughout the palace. Nye Dao's entire body trembled as turbid tears rolled down from his aged eyes. Nangong Jueming was the name of the ancestor of the Nangong family. Half a month ago, when Nangong Jueming had come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to propose marriage, not only had Nye Dao suffered 3 palm strikes from Nangong Duo, but he had also paid an even greater price. He had extracted his soul sealing power and given it to Nangong Jueming. Nangong Jueming had promised him that as long as he obtained the soul sealing power, He would not touch the people of the Wind and Cloud Alliance or the Nye family. Nye Dao had personally ordered for the Wind and Cloud Alliance to be disbanded, and he had even prepared for the direct descendants of the Nye family to seek refuge in the ancestral grounds. However, he had never thought that Nangong Jueming would go back on his word and massacre Compassionate Light City. "Grandfather, your martial body." At this moment, Nye Tian supported Nye Dao. He discovered in shock that the presence of the soul-sealing power had disappeared from Nye Dao's body. He sensed Nye Dao with the senses of his soul, and to his shock, he discovered that Nye Dao was only an overgod. "What's going on?" Nye Tian forced himself to calm down and bellowed furiously. Nye Dao's body swayed slightly. He was like a candle in the wind, about to be extinguished at any time. A long while later, Nye Dao calmed down and told his grandfather what had happened. Nye Tian's face was so sunken that blood seemed to drip from his face. Nangong Jueming was so insidious that he had tricked Nye Dao into giving him the soul-sealing power, then went back on his word and massacred Compassionate Light City. "Nye Dao, get out here!" Just as Nye Dao and Nye Tian were filled with grief and indignation, a deep and vigorous roar rang out from outside the Storm Palace. It was like a clap of thunder that resounded throughout the entire Storm Palace. "Nangong Jueming!" Nye Dao's face suddenly froze when he heard the voice. He was extremely shocked. He could tell that the voice belonged to the ancestor of the Nangong family, Nangong Jueming. Nangong Jueming had come to the Wind and Cloud Palace once again. Was he going to massacre the Nye family? When Nye Dao thought of this, his face turned ashen, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Nye Tian furrowed his brows. His eyes were filled with anger as he growled, "I'll go meet him." "Nye Tian, you can't go. Come with me to the Nye family's ancestral land right now." Nye Dao was shocked, but immediately reacted. He dragged Nye Tian towards the Nye family's ancestral land. Nangong Jueming's domineering appearance showed that he wanted to exterminate the Nye clan. If Nye Tian went out at this time, wouldn't that be equivalent to throwing away his life? Nye Tian was the last hope of the Nye family. How could Nye Dao just watch him throw his life away? "Grandpa, we can't escape." Nye Tian pulled Nye Dao and said solemnly, "Since Nangong Jueming is here, then let me see how strong he is." Nye Dao's face sank. He looked at Nye Tian and shook his head. However, Nye Tian had already made up his mind. With a stomp of his feet, the floor cracked, and his figure flew out of the palace. Nye Dao's eyes trembled, and he quickly followed. High up in the sky outside the Wind and Cloud Palace, 3 figures stood tall like 3 mountains, giving off an imposing aura. 2 of them were familiar. They were the Nangong family's patriarch, Nangong Duo, and the Holy Assembly's vice-chairman, Nangong Dushio. As for the other figure, his face was old and his hair was all white. However, the aura around his body was incomparably violent. Standing high up in the sky, he was like a devil. Especially his pair of cold and gloomy eyes, they were like sharp blades that could almost pierce through a person's soul. This old man was the Nangong family's ancestor, Nangong Jueming. Nangong Jueming, Nangong Duo, and Nangong Dushio were the 3 strongest people of the Nangong family. "Nye Dao, get out here!" Once again, Nangong Jueming roared. His aura surged, and bolts of lightning appeared behind him. The powerful suppressive power transformed into a boundless pressure that was incomparably terrifying. Nye Feiyu and the others on the ground turned red under the immense pressure, and their bodies felt like they were about to be torn apart. Only Nye Filio had a calm expression as he ceaselessly emanated strands of profound energy of the laws to protect himself and the people by his side. If it weren't for him, Nye Feiyu and Jun Ouching wouldn't have been able to withstand the terrifying pressure in the sky. Boom! Just at this moment, a figure rushed out of the Wind and Cloud Palace like a rainbow. He landed on the ground and his aura surged. Under the endless pressure, he forcefully created a space. "Nye Tian." June Ouching cried out in surprise when she saw Nye Tian come out. However, her face froze in the next instant. She was extremely worried. She knew that the three people in front of her had come for Nye Tian. Nye Tian's appearance at this time was extremely dangerous. Nangong Jueming, the person you're looking for is me. Nye Tian's figure landed, and his eyes locked onto Nangong Jueming. He said in a cold voice, "I killed that trash, Nangong Lin. You killed my son." Nangong Duo's eyes trembled when he heard Nye Tian's words. He growled, and his killing intent surged. "Nye Tian, you really didn't die." Nangong Dushio was stunned when he saw Nye Tian. He said in a deep voice, "Looks like the Lord of the Reverse Scale's Black Scale Curse aura is only SOSO. It didn't take your life." Back then, he and the Lord of the Reverse Scale had joined hands, but they hadn't been able to kill Nye Tian. Who is this brat? Nangong Jueming's gloomy eyes looked at Nye Tian. An unconcealable blazing light surged in his eyes as he asked in a deep voice, "Lord Ancestor, this brat is the person with the demon god nascent embryo." Nangong Dushio bowed slightly. Although he was the vice-chairman of the Holy Assembly, he still had to lower his head in front of his ancestor. "Lord Ancestor, let me kill him and take revenge for Nangong Lin." Nangong Duo's eyes turned cold. His figure moved, and he wanted to attack. "Wait." However, Nangong Jueming spoke in a deep voice. His figure flickered, and he landed on the ground. He stared at Nye Tian with a pair of cold eyes and said, "This old man would like to see what the legendary power of gods and devils is like." After he finished speaking, 9 thunderbolts suddenly appeared behind him. They formed a huge purple thunderbolt that was nearly 10,000 meters long. They were like 9 tornadoes, and they emitted an extremely berserk aura that seemed like they could destroy everything. Purple thunder 9 roars. Nye Tian's eyes trembled when he saw the 9 purple thunderbolts, and he cried out in surprise. He wasn't unfamiliar with this aura. It was the lightning origin energy, Purple Thunder 9 roars. However, the Purple Thunder 9 roars released by Nangong Jueming was clearly much stronger than Nangong Lin's. This kind of thunderbolt aura was vigorous and powerful, and it seemed like it could suppress everything. Not good, this guy has fused with the complete Purple Thunder 9 roars. At this moment, the fat cat cried out in surprise. His face was extremely shocked, and it seemed to have stiffened. Nangong Jueming had been a half-saint long ago. Now that he had fused with the Purple Thunder 9 roars, his strength could be imagined. Chapter 2674. Chapter 2674. Chapter 2674. Too terrifying. Boom. Up in the sky, the purple lightning struck down. Instantly, the force of the lightning surged out like layers upon layers of giant waves, raining down upon Nye Tian's body. Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and his lips curled into a smile as the power of the stars surged out of his body, clashing head-on with the might of the lightning in the sky. Boom! A dull rumble rang out in midair. As if the purple lightning had struck an iron plate, it abruptly paused in the air, unable to descend any further. Nangong Jueming's eyes darkened at the sight, and he was beyond surprised. He clearly did not expect that Nye Tian's strength would be so bizarre that he could actually resist the might of his lightning. Although it was just one bolt of lightning, it was enough to crush an ordinary pinnacle supreme god. Nye Tian was clearly only a late-stage supreme god, and yet he was able to resist the might of the lightning so easily, which left Nangong Jueming very surprised. But in the next moment, Nangong Jueming's face darkened, and he smiled coldly. "Kid, you do have some strength. Unfortunately, before I, no matter how heaven-defying you are still nothing but trash." As his insolent voice fell, Nangong Jueming immediately added 2 more bolts of purple lightning with a thought. The violent might of the lightning descended upon Nye Tian like a hurricane. However, Nye Tian stood where he was without saying a word, as if he was an immovable mountain. Nangong Jueming's strength was at most that of a demi-saint, and wanting to suppress Nye Tian with his aura was a little too much. The 3 bolts of lightning still did not move Nye Tian. Nangong Jueming exclaimed in surprise once more, and then laughed coldly. It seems that I has underestimated you. Boom! 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 In the next moment, another 3 bolts of lightning descended upon Nye Tian. Nye Tian's body swayed slightly, but he quickly stood firm, and even his expression was very calm. This time, everyone's eyes shuddered violently, as they were utterly astounded. Nye Tian's strength is actually so strong. Nye Dao's eyes trembled as he thought to himself in shock. Nangong Jueming's 6 lightning suppressive pressure, even a half-step peak martial artist would find it hard to endure. Yet, Nye Tian could endure it so easily. Doesn't that mean his battle prowess has already surpassed a half-step peak martial artist? Thinking of this, Nye Dao's expression stiffened, and he felt even more regret. He should directly send Nye Tian to the ancestors' land. With Nye Tian's talent, it wouldn't take long for him to break through the shackles of the God Realm peak and reach a higher martial arts realm. But now it was too late. Even if Nye Tian was Nye Tian, it was impossible for him to fight against Nangong Jueming. This brat's strength, how did he advance so quickly? Nangong Duxiu was startled and she cried out in her heart. Over a month ago, Nye Tian was still an ant-like existence in his eyes. Even though he did not kill Nye Tian, he believed that Nye Tian had escaped by a fluke. But now, he faintly sensed that Nye Tian had the battle prowess of a God Realm peak martial artist. This brat is too terrifying. Nangong Duxiu frowned, his eyes filled with killing intent. He wished he could directly attack and kill Nye Tian. But since Nangong Jueming did not speak, he naturally did not dare to attack. Nangong Jueming was once again astonished. His eyes trembled slightly, and his gaze became incomparably passionate. He had just obtained Nye Dao's godly sealing power, but now he felt that the godly fiend god power was 10 times more terrifying than the godly sealing power. If he could obtain Nye Tian's godly fiend god nascent embryo, his strength would definitely improve. Brat, your strength has indeed surpassed I's expectations. But how long can you last? Then, Nangong Jueming sneered. Another 3 thunderbolts rumbled, releasing boundless might that was exerted on Nye Tian's body. 9 thunderbolts might. This was the strongest might that Nangong Jueming could release at the moment. If Nye Tian could still persist under such circumstances, then he would have no choice but to make a move. Boom! Nye Tian felt waves of incomparably powerful pressure coming from above his head. It was like layers of raging waves that continuously pressed down and attacked his martial body. But he was like a boulder standing in the middle of a river, not moving at all. Even his expression was normal, without any change. How is this possible? This time, Nangong Jueming was completely shocked. He roared in anger, and his old face was incomparably ugly. But then, his gaze became greedy and passionate. The stronger the strength that Nye Tian displayed, the more terrifying the godly fiend god nascent embryo was. At this moment, Nangong Jueming had already made up his mind. He must obtain the godly fiend god power. Old fart, what else do you have? Show me all you want. Just then, Nye Tian suddenly growled. Then, his body shook and waves of astral energy gushed out of him, vibrating in the air. Rumble, rumble. The purple thunderbolts that were circling above his head started to crumble, turning into violent energy in the air. Nangong Jueming's eyes quivered. He was stunned by this scene, and his eyeballs were about to fall out of their sockets. Not even in his dreams did he think that not only could Nye Tian resist his pressure so easily, but he also had the strength to resist. Break! In the next second, Nye Tian shouted. The qi around his body exploded, and the entire space shook as if it was about to be flipped over. Bang! 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 The astral energy was like waves of crazy waves that spread out. The 9 purple thunderbolts directly crumbled in the air. At this moment, Nangong Jueming's body shook violently, and he actually took a few steps back. He looked extremely embarrassed. He had never expected that Nye Tian would be able to break through his oppressive aura and send him flying. Nangong Jueming steadied himself, but his old face was slightly hot, as if he had been slapped a few times in the face in public. Everyone present was also shocked by this scene. They all stared at Nye Tian, so shocked that they could not speak. "Old fart, make your move." At this moment, Nye Tian stomped on the ground and shot up into the sky. Sword will surged out of his body like a sharp sword that could tear through everything. Nye Tian. Nye Dao's eyes trembled as he cried out in surprise. He could not believe his eyes. Nye Tian had actually shot up into the sky, and from the looks of it, he was about to fight Nangong Jueming. Was it not suicidal for a late-stage overgod to fight a demi-saint? Nye Tian was certainly shocking, but anyone with a bit of rationality would not believe that he had the strength to fight Nangong Jueming. "Nye Tian, what are you doing?" That was when Fat Cat suddenly thought of something and cried out in shock. "A 9th-grade chaos beast." Nye Tian's lips twitched as he spoke flatly. "That's right, a 9th-grade chaos beast." At this moment, Nye Tian had no other choice but to use the 9th-grade chaos beast. He had used the 9th-grade Chaos Beast once in the Ghost Emperor's tomb before, and had personally witnessed how terrifying it was. Nangong Jueming's strength should be at the level of a demi-saint. Even if Nye Tian used the 9th-grade Chaos Beast, he might still have a chance. Chapter 2675. How shameless! Nye Tian, you can't use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. Fat Cat screamed when he heard that Nye Tian wanted to use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. Previously, in the Ghost Thearka's burial ground, Nye Tian had already made an exception and used the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. His whereabouts had already been exposed. If he used the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast again, he would definitely attract terrifying enemies. "Fat, I'm sorry. I have to use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast." Nye Tian's eyes were filled with killing intent as he spoke. Of course, he didn't want to use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. However, given the situation before him, he had no choice. If he couldn't defeat Nangong Jueming, then everyone present would have to die. "Lad, do you think you can fight me?" Nangong Jueming looked at Nye Tian and felt that it was a joke. He said coldly, "Do you think that just because you can break I's aura suppression, you have the ability to fight I?" When experts faced the weak, they most often used aura suppression. This was the attitude of the strong to crush the opponent. However, aura suppression definitely didn't represent a martial artist's true strength. Therefore, when Nangong Jueming saw that Nye Tian wanted to fight him now, he felt that it was a joke. "Do you think I'm that weak?" Nye Tian laughed coldly. Then, a thought entered his mind, and he was about to release the 9 Supreme's Chaos Beast. However, at this moment, his expression changed, and he stiffened. At this moment, he was shocked to find that he couldn't use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. "Little 9. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed. He realized that the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast was lying in the Chaos Original coffin, as if it was asleep. No matter how he called, he couldn't wake it up. "What's going on?" The sudden change caused Nye Tian to cry out in alarm, his expression extremely grim. He had never thought that the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast would actually have such a change. He suddenly couldn't use it. At this moment, the Fat Cat was also stunned for a moment. Then, it realized something and screamed, "Seal!" When Nye Tian heard the Fat Cat's voice, he frowned. He immediately realized that the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast's body was actually covered in a dense layer of seals. Those runes were very subtle, and they released a very mysterious aura. Chaos Evil Energy. The next moment, Nye Tian sensed the aura of Chaos Evil Energy on the seal. He immediately reacted and exclaimed, "The Ghost Emperor!" The thing that sealed the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast was Chaos Evil Energy. This made Nye Tian immediately think of the Ghost Emperor. That's right, it's the seal placed by the Ghost Emperor. At that moment, the Ghost Emperor's voice was heard. He sneered and said, Nye Tian, did you think that I didn't do anything in the primal chaos origin coffin? Eyebrows furrowed, Nye Tian exclaimed, clenching his fists so hard that they started to crack. The Ghost Emperor. He had never thought that the Ghost Emperor would actually seal the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. At a time like this, the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast couldn't be used. Wasn't this going to kill Nye Tian? Nye Tian, I'm doing this for your own good. The last time you used the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast, those people would have long been alarmed. The Ghost Emperor said confidently, I sealed the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast to prevent the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast's aura from escaping, so that those people wouldn't be able to find you. Do you understand? Nye Tian's eyes were bloodshot. He wanted nothing more than to kill the Ghost Emperor right now. It had to be said that the Ghost Emperor was really doing this for Nye Tian's sake. If those people who were looking for the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast really found Nye Tian, then Nye Tian wouldn't be the only one who would be in trouble. The entire 9 regions, or even 10,000 regions, would be implicated. The secrets behind the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast were far beyond Nye Tian's imagination. Of course, the Ghost Emperor was doing this for his own sake as well. If Nye Tian were to die, the Ghost Emperor's soul fragment would naturally be reduced to ashes as well. Still, he never imagined that Nye Tian would run into a powerful demi-saint opponent just as he returned to the 9 regions. Phew! The fat cat breathed a long, turbid breath. It was certainly a good thing that Nye Tian couldn't use the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. Still, how was he going to solve the current situation? Ghost Emperor, do you have any ideas? The fat cat asked the Ghost Emperor directly without holding back. I'm already very weak after sealing the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. How would I be able to deal with a demi-saint now? The Ghost Emperor frowned and replied coldly. He found it rather laughable at the moment. It would be the greatest joke if the great Ghost Emperor were to die by Nangong Jueming's hand. In the distant past, a martial artist of Nangong Jueming's level would not even be fit to carry the Ghost Emperor's shoes. But now, Nangong Jueming had become the Ghost Emperor's greatest threat. Brat, are you bluffing in front of this old man? That was when Nangong Jueming stared cold at Nye Tian and laughed wildly. Are you going to just stand there and wait for death if you ask for a fight? Nye Tian's face was as calm as still water, and he did not say a word. He did not expect the situation before him to turn out like this. Without the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast, how could he fight Nangong Jueming? Fight! But in the very next moment, Nye Tian's gaze darkened. Sword will surged around his body, and the power of the stars was unleashed, surging in the air. Even if his opponent was powerful, he would never back down. Brat, are you crazy? When the Ghost Emperor saw this, he shouted in shock, and his throat went numb. He had never seen a late-stage over-god martial artist shouting so loudly in front of a demi-saint. Nye Tian's gaze was as cold as ice, and his entire being was like a sharp sword. He was not a lunatic, but he had nowhere to retreat at the moment. All he could do was fight. Humph! Nangong Jueming laughed coldly and said sinisterly, Brat, since you insist on dying, I shall fulfill your wish. As he spoke, Nangong Jueming's body shuddered, and a bolt of purple lightning surged out of his back, turning into a violent force that extended endlessly in the void like a lotus that instantly bloomed. Wherever the purple lightning passed, the space around it would turn into a sea of lightning, forming a giant net of lightning that stretched over tens of thousands of meters. Boom! 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 Deafening explosions rang out incessantly in the void. Nangong Jueming's aura was so powerful that the entire world had instantly turned into a raging sea of lightning. Nye Tian's gaze trembled as he sensed the aura of lightning in the air, and his entire aura was instantly suppressed and weakened by several notches. Brat, be good and die. At this moment, Nangong Jueming's voice resounded, and he raised his palm. Instantly, an endless amount of lightning surged out, like layers of raging waves, pressing down on Nyetian. In an instant, the space shook, lightning flashed, and thunder roared, as though the entire world was about to be torn apart by the lightning. Earth Sword, Moon Devourer. The violent lightning in the void did not make Nyetian lose his will to fight. He roared, and the sword intent in his body surged. He wanted to fight with Nangong Jueming to the death. Boom! However, at this moment the space trembled violently. After that, a sphere of light appeared, like a sun, exploding in the air. Beams of light shot out, transforming into a gentle energy that descended from the sky. In the next moment, the ball of light suddenly descended, and like a shield, it wrapped around Nyetian. Bang, bang, bang! The endless lightning in the void bombarded over, but it was blocked by the light shield, and the lightning kept shattering in the space. The ball of light did not seem to be special, but it contained an extremely terrifying power that could block the power of the 9 roars of purple thunder. Nangong Jueming frowned when he saw this, and immediately stopped his attack. At the same time he roared, "Who is it? Show yourself!"